Long before clocks, electricity, or heated rooms, winter nights were not simply dark. They were stretches of time so long that early humans could not fully measure them. A fire might fade hours before dawn. The cold could slow movement, numb fingers, and silence entire landscapes. In some regions, people may have spent nearly half their lives inside darkness during winter seasons alone. Yet what frightened them most was not always hunger or predators. It may have been the strange feeling that time itself had stopped moving. When the world outside vanished into cold black silence, how did the human mind endure nights that seemed to have no ending at all? For early humans, time did not move through numbers. It moved through light. Morning meant visibility. Afternoon meant warmth. Sunset meant caution. Night meant waiting. Thousands of years before mechanical clocks appeared, the human brain depended almost entirely on changes in sunlight to understand the passing of a day. This made winter profoundly different from every other season. During colder months, daylight became shorter, weaker, and less reliable. In northern regions especially, the sun could disappear early behind clouds, mountains, forests, or long horizons of ice. What remained afterward was not simply darkness, but an extended period in which the human mind had very few ways to measure how much time had passed at all. For modern people, even in the middle of the night, small lights continue to surround daily life. A phone screen glows beside the bed, a clock quietly counts minutes, street lights filter through windows. The brain receives constant reassurance that time is still moving forward. Early humans had almost none of these signals. Once firelight weakened and the outside world disappeared into darkness, there were few markers separating 1 hour from the next. Anthropologists and sleep researchers often note that human perception of time becomes less stable in conditions without environmental change. In caves, polar stations, or isolated darkness experiments, people frequently lose accurate awareness of duration. Minutes feel longer, nights feel stretched. Without sunlight, the brain struggles to organize experience into clear sequences. Winter amplified this effect for prehistoric humans because darkness occupied so much more of life than it does today. During summer, evenings changed gradually. Distant sounds remained active. Insects continued moving. Air stayed softer. The world still felt alive after sunset. Winter removed many of those signals. Cold air reduced animal movement. Frozen ground absorbed sound differently. Snow, when present, muted entire landscapes. Even wind sometimes disappeared into stillness. A winter night could feel suspended, almost detached from normal time. Archaeological evidence suggests that many Ice Age communities lived in environments where surviving winter demanded careful energy conservation. Movement after dark carried risks. Hunting became harder. Injuries became more dangerous. Fuel for fires had to be managed carefully. This likely caused many groups to remain physically still for long periods after sunset. The less activity the body performs, the slower time often appears to pass in human perception. A person sitting silently beside fading embers, listening to cold air outside a shelter, may have experienced the night as something enormous and unmoving. Human biology also contributed to this sensation. The body's circadian rhythms are strongly shaped by exposure to light. Reduced daylight increases melatonin production, the hormone associated with sleepiness and darkness. Even today, many people report fatigue, slower thinking, and altered mood during winter months because sunlight exposure changes hormonal cycles. Early humans experienced these effects far more intensely because artificial lighting barely existed beyond the immediate reach of fire. A single flame could illuminate faces and nearby tools, but it could not recreate daylight. Beyond a few meters, darkness remained complete. In this way, winter nights were not only visually longer, they were biologically longer. The body itself entered a slower rhythm. Researchers studying traditional societies without electric lighting have observed that sleep patterns often align closely with natural light cycles. People may spend more total time resting during winter simply because darkness lasts longer. Yet resting did not always mean sleeping continuously. Early humans likely experienced long stretches of quiet wakefulness during the night, especially as fires needed tending or temperatures shifted. These waking moments may have deepened the sensation that winter nights had no clear ending. Without clocks, without reliable light, and without strong environmental activity, the mind could drift into an uncertain state where time felt stretched far beyond its actual length. The winter night became more than part of a day. It became an environment of its own, one that humans entered and endured together, waiting for the return of light that could finally make the world measurable again. Winter did not only darken the world for early humans, it changed the speed at which life seemed to move. In warmer seasons, days contained many visible transitions. Shadows shifted across the ground, birds moved through trees, people traveled farther from shelters. Hunting, gathering, repairing tools, and searching for water created a constant flow of activity that naturally divided the day into smaller parts. The human brain measures time partly through change. When many things happen, time feels structured. When little changes, time can begin to feel stretched and undefined. Winter slowly removed many of those changes from daily life. Cold temperatures forced early humans to reduce unnecessary movement, especially after sunset. The body loses heat quickly in freezing air, and preserving energy became essential for survival. Anthropologists studying hunter-gatherer adaptation have noted that winter often reduced the range of daily travel and increased the amount of time spent near shelter or fire. This did not mean people became inactive all day, but activity patterns narrowed. Once darkness arrived, movement likely slowed even more. Outside the immediate glow of firelight, visibility dropped sharply. Snow, fog, or winter cloud cover could make the environment nearly impossible to navigate safely at night. As a result, many hours during winter may have been spent in relative stillness. Stillness changes the mind's perception of duration. Modern psychological studies repeatedly show that periods with low stimulation often feel longer than periods filled with movement and variety. A person waiting in silence without distraction commonly overestimates how much time has passed. Early humans did not have books, recorded music, or artificial entertainment to occupy long winter evenings. Conversation, storytelling, tool repair, or quiet observation near a fire may have filled part of the night, but eventually many moments would have dissolved into extended silence and waiting. In those conditions, darkness could begin to feel almost physical, surrounding the group hour after hour without visible progress toward morning. Seasonal light patterns also affected emotional perception. In higher latitudes, winter sunsets arrive extremely early. Even today, many people living in northern climates describe emotional heaviness during months with limited daylight. Scientists link part of this response to changes in circadian rhythms, serotonin balance, and melatonin production. Early humans lived far closer to these natural cycles than modern people do. Without electric lighting, their bodies experienced the full psychological weight of seasonal darkness. A winter evening beginning in late afternoon may have created the sensation that night occupied nearly the entire world. This feeling likely became even stronger during periods of severe Ice Age climate. During the last glacial maximum, beginning around 20,000 years ago, large regions of the northern hemisphere experienced colder temperatures and longer winters than many modern populations know today. Human groups surviving in these environments depended heavily on cooperation, stored knowledge, and careful use of resources. Yet even with experience, Winter remained difficult because it disrupted predictability. Storms could block movement. Clouds could hide the moon for days. Snow altered familiar landscapes. The environment itself became harder to read. Human beings feel calmer when they can anticipate change. Winter often reduced that ability. One reason nights may have felt endless was because people could not easily sense progress through them. There were no consistent sounds of traffic, machinery, or distant human activity. Many animals became quieter or migrated away. Even fire behaved differently during long winter nights. As wood burned down, light gradually weakened, and shadows expanded through shelters or cave walls. The shrinking glow may have subtly reinforced the impression that darkness was winning rather than passing. In this environment, the human brain had little evidence that dawn was approaching. Only very slow changes in cold, faint moonlight or distant color at the horizon signaled the eventual return of morning. The experience of waiting through winter darkness was therefore not simply about fear. It was also about uncertainty in perception itself. Time without visible change can feel detached from normal human understanding. For early humans, winter nights may have seemed endless, partly because the brain had so few reliable markers to divide one hour from another. The darkness was not only longer in measurable terms, it occupied attention differently, slowed thought differently, and surrounded human awareness in a way modern life rarely allows anymore. For early humans, the most difficult part of a winter night may not have been the beginning of darkness, but the long period before dawn. Sunset itself still carried movement. Fires were adjusted. Food might be shared. People settled into shelters or sleeping spaces. Voices remained active for a time, but eventually the night reached a quieter stage when most visible activity stopped. The fire lowered into softer embers. Bodies became still. Outside, the landscape disappeared almost completely. It was during these hours, deep between sunset and sunrise, that time may have felt hardest to understand. Modern people rarely experience true pre-dawn darkness. Even during sleepless nights, digital clocks provide constant orientation. A person can glance at a screen and instantly know whether only 10 minutes or several hours have passed. Early humans had no precise way to separate one silent hour from another. Once darkness stabilized, the environment offered very few clues about progression toward morning. The stars moved slowly, but cloud cover often hid them during winter. Moonlight changed throughout the lunar cycle and disappeared entirely on some nights. Inside caves, shelters, or temporary dwellings, many people may have seen almost nothing beyond the nearest firelight. Human perception depends heavily on external change. Without change, the mind drifts away from accurate timekeeping. Researchers who study isolation and sensory deprivation have repeatedly observed that humans lose reliable awareness of duration when environmental signals are reduced. People resting in darkness often underestimate or overestimate time dramatically because the brain no longer receives enough information to structure experience clearly. Early humans lived much closer to these conditions than modern populations. Winter intensified the effect because cold nights encouraged long periods of inactivity and waiting. The hours before dawn may have felt especially endless because dawn itself arrives very slowly in winter. During summer, early morning light often spreads gradually through warm air filled with sounds of insects and birds. Winter mornings are different. In many cold environments, dawn begins faintly and hesitantly. Thick cloud layers can delay brightness even after sunrise technically begins. Snowstorms or fog can leave landscapes dim for hours. This meant that early humans could spend enormous stretches of time in uncertainty, unable to tell whether morning was still distant or quietly approaching. The human body also changes during the final hours of night. Core temperature naturally drops before dawn as part of circadian rhythm. In cold climates, this decline may have become even more noticeable. A person waking briefly during these hours could feel the deepest cold of the entire night while still surrounded by darkness. The fire may have weakened considerably by then, requiring someone to carefully restore it or conserve remaining fuel until daylight. These moments likely sharpened awareness of time because discomfort becomes more noticeable when the body is tired and waiting. Archaeological evidence from prehistoric shelters shows repeated signs of long-term fire maintenance, suggesting that keeping warmth through the night was a constant task rather than a simple comfort. Yet maintaining fire required resources. Wood had to be gathered, dried, protected, and used carefully. Many groups could not allow flames to burn strongly without interruption all night long. As fires dimmed, darkness slowly reclaimed the shelter itself. Shadows thickened along walls and ceilings. Faces disappeared from view. The shrinking circle of light may have deepened the sensation that night was expanding rather than ending. Some sleep historians also believe that pre-industrial humans often slept in separate phases, waking naturally for periods during the middle of the night before sleeping again. If early humans experienced similar patterns, winter nights would have contained long intervals of conscious awareness inside darkness. A person might wake beside cooling embers, listen to distant wind, hear breathing nearby, and remain awake without any clear sense of how long remained until sunrise. In these conditions, the mind could begin stretching time emotionally. Minutes felt larger because there was little else competing for attention. The silence of winter amplified inner thought. Memory, worry, observation, and imagination all became more noticeable when external activity disappeared. This may be one reason winter nights felt endless to early humans, not because the nights were infinitely long in reality, but because darkness removed the ordinary signals that help the human brain feel movement through time. Before dawn, the world often became so still that time itself seemed to pause with it, leaving people suspended between one day and the next, waiting quietly for the first proof that light would return again. Cold changes human behavior long before it becomes dangerous. Even small drops in temperature influence how the body moves, how quickly muscles respond, and how much energy the brain is willing to spend. For early humans living through long winters, this effect shaped nearly every hour after sunset. Nighttime activity did not simply decrease because it was dark. It decreased because the body itself was trying to survive. Human beings maintain a narrow internal temperature range, and keeping that temperature stable requires energy. In cold environments, the body begins conserving heat almost immediately. Blood vessels near the skin narrow to reduce heat loss. Fingers and toes cool first. Movement becomes slower and more deliberate. The body subtly encourages stillness because unnecessary motion wastes calories that may already be difficult to replace during winter months. Early humans understood this reality without needing scientific language for it. Through experience, they learned that warmth depended on careful use of energy. Anthropologists studying traditional cold weather survival repeatedly observed the same pattern across many human cultures. Winter encourages clustering, reduced travel, and longer periods spent near protected spaces. Even today, modern people often become quieter and less active during cold evenings. Early humans experienced this instinct far more strongly because they lacked insulated buildings, heated clothing, and artificial heat sources beyond fire. Once darkness covered the landscape, every movement outside a shelter carried physical cost. Walking through snow, frozen ground, or icy wind rapidly drained body heat. Wet clothing could become dangerous. Hunting after dark offered low visibility and high risk. The safest choice was often to remain still whenever possible. This created an important psychological effect. Human beings usually experience time through activity. A busy day filled with motion, decisions, and environmental change feels structured and divided into clear segments. Cold winter nights removed much of that structure. As bodies settled near fires and movement slowed, the mind received fewer signals marking the passage of hours. The body's own chemistry reinforced this slowing sensation. In cold conditions, metabolism works continuously to preserve warmth, but the brain also tends to encourage rest. Modern sleep research shows that cooler environments can increase feelings of drowsiness and physical heaviness, especially in darkness. For early humans exposed to long winter nights, the combination of low light and cold temperatures may have created a constant tension between discomfort and exhaustion. The body wanted rest, but the environment remained difficult enough that full relaxation was not always possible. A person could feel deeply tired while still remaining alert to cold, sounds, or changes in the fire. Winter nights, therefore, became periods of reduced but uneasy activity. The world did not stop completely, but it slowed enough that each hour became more noticeable. Archaeological studies of Ice Age shelters suggest that many prehistoric groups carefully organized living spaces around heat preservation. Animal hides, stone barriers, compact sleeping arrangements, and controlled fire placement all helped reduce heat loss. These arrangements reveal how central warmth was to survival. Yet even the best shelter could not fully remove winter from human experience. Cold air entered through openings, fires weakened through the night, smoke accumulated in enclosed spaces, sleep may have been shallow or interrupted. The body likely remained aware of temperature almost continuously. This constant awareness made winter nights feel physically longer because discomfort draws attention toward time itself. A comfortable environment allows people to lose track of hours. A cold environment often does the opposite. The slowing effect of winter also extended beyond humans into the surrounding landscape. Animals became quieter, insects disappeared, water froze or moved more slowly beneath ice. Forests lost leaves, reducing motion and sound. In some snowy environments, footsteps themselves became muffled. The outside world entered a quieter state that mirrored the reduced movement inside human shelters. This widespread stillness may have intensified the impression that winter nights stretched endlessly forward without interruption. There was simply less happening in the environment to signal progress from one moment to the next. For early humans, winter darkness was not empty only because of missing sunlight. It was empty because cold transformed behavior at every level. Muscles slowed, voices softened, travel decreased, entire landscapes became quieter and less active. The body entered a mode focused not on exploration or expansion, but on preservation. In that slowed state, hours became heavier. Night no longer felt like a brief interruption between days. It became a long condition the body had to endure carefully, conserving warmth and waiting patiently for morning to arrive again. As winter nights deepened, early humans were often drawn physically closer together. This was not only emotional or social behavior, it was practical biology. Human bodies produce heat continuously, and in cold environments that heat becomes valuable. Long before insulated homes or controlled heating existed, survival during winter frequently depended on reducing exposure to cold air as much as possible. Archaeological evidence from prehistoric shelters suggests that people often organized sleeping and resting areas in compact ways, likely helping groups preserve warmth through shared body heat and reduced open space. Winter therefore changed not only how humans moved, but also how near they remained to one another after sunset. The fire became the center of this arrangement. In many prehistoric shelters, nearly every important nighttime activity occurred close to its light and warmth. Food preparation, tool repair, conversation, and rest all gathered around the same small source of heat. Beyond the reach of flames, temperatures could fall rapidly. A few steps away from the fire might already feel unsafe during severe cold. This created a very different experience from modern indoor life, where warmth fills entire buildings evenly. Early humans lived with concentrated warmth surrounded by darkness and cold. The closer someone remained to the fire, the more stable the body felt. The farther away, the more strongly winter returned. This concentration of warmth changed human behavior in subtle ways. People likely moved less once they settled near the fire because leaving meant losing heat. Even small tasks outside the warm area became uncomfortable. Retrieving wood, checking outside conditions, or shifting sleeping positions exposed the body to colder air. As a result, winter nights encouraged physical stillness. The group gathered inward, remaining close not only to the fire, but to each other. In this reduced space, human awareness may have become unusually focused on small details. The crackling of burning wood, breathing nearby, shifting shadows on stone or hide walls, and distant wind outside could dominate attention for long periods. Modern life rarely leaves the human brain in such an environment. Today, constant noise and artificial light divide attention continuously. Early humans during winter often experienced the opposite. The world narrowed into a small circle of warmth surrounded by darkness. Anthropologists who study traditional fire-centered societies have noted that evening firelight changes social behavior. Conversations slow, voices soften, attention turns inward. Firelight itself creates a calmer visual environment because it flickers gently rather than illuminating everything evenly. During winter, these effects likely became even stronger. The fire was not entertainment. It was protection against cold and darkness. Yet because so much attention centered on it, the night may have taken on a quieter and more reflective rhythm. This rhythm also affected the perception of time. When people remain physically close in confined spaces for many hours, small moments become more noticeable. A piece of wood collapsing in the fire could briefly interrupt long silence. Someone adjusting a blanket or animal hide could become the only visible movement for several minutes. In these conditions, the mind often begins stretching awareness across slower intervals. Time feels fuller because there are fewer distractions compressing it. A winter night beside a fire may therefore have seemed emotionally larger than its actual duration. Cold weather likely strengthened this inward focus because winter reduced opportunities to engage with the outside environment after dark. During warmer seasons, people might still travel short distances at night, observe movement around them, or interact more actively with open landscapes. Winter limited these possibilities. Darkness outside became hostile more quickly. Wind, frozen ground, and reduced visibility discouraged wandering beyond shelter. The group's attention naturally folded inward toward the protected space around the fire. Researchers studying social bonding suggest that physical proximity and synchronized quiet behavior can increase feelings of group connection. Early humans may not have understood this consciously, but winter probably intensified social closeness simply because survival required shared warmth and coordinated rest. In that sense, winter nights were not only long periods of darkness, they were also long periods of human closeness. Bodies gathered together against cold, sharing limited heat while waiting for dawn. Yet this closeness may also have sharpened awareness of how vast the darkness remained outside. Beyond the small circle of warmth, the world still felt immense, frozen and invisible. The fire could gather people together, but it could not make the night smaller. And perhaps that contrast made winter evenings feel even longer. A fragile pocket of warmth held carefully inside a darkness that seemed to continue endlessly beyond it. One of the quietest changes brought by winter was the disappearance of sound. Early humans did not live in silent worlds during most of the year. Forests carried movement from insects, birds, flowing water, leaves, and distant animals. Even at night, warmer seasons often remained acoustically alive. Small noises continuously reminded people that the world around them was still active. Winter slowly erased many of these signals. As temperatures dropped, insects vanished. Migrating animals moved away. Frozen rivers lost much of their flowing sound beneath ice. Trees without leaves moved differently in the wind. Snow, when it covered the ground, absorbed and softened noise across large distances. Entire landscapes became quieter in ways modern urban life rarely experiences. This silence likely affected the human mind more deeply than people today often realize. Human beings evolved in environments where sound constantly carried information about movement, danger, weather, and nearby life. The brain continuously monitors these signals even during rest. When the environment suddenly becomes quiet, awareness can sharpen rather than relax. Modern studies of isolated environments show that prolonged silence often changes how people perceive time and internal thought. Without steady external stimulation, the mind begins noticing smaller details, including heartbeat, breathing, distant creaks, and passing thoughts. Early humans, spending long winter nights near fading fires, may have experienced this effect regularly. Silence made the night feel larger because there was less sensory activity, breaking it into smaller moments. Cold itself contributed to this stillness. Very low temperatures discourage movement in both humans and animals because movement increases energy use. During severe winter conditions, many creatures conserve energy by reducing activity or remaining sheltered. This meant that early humans were not only quieter themselves, but surrounded by a quieter world. A person awake during the middle of a winter night might hear almost nothing beyond shifting firewood, wind against stone, or breathing inside the shelter. Hours could pass with barely any environmental change at all. In such conditions, time becomes difficult for the brain to measure accurately. Sound normally acts as a natural clock. Repeated noises help organize awareness unconsciously. The absence of those noises removes subtle markers of progression. Anthropologists and psychologists both note that humans often experience silence differently at night than during daytime. In daylight, silence can feel peaceful because visibility remains strong. The environment still appears understandable. At night, silence can feel uncertain because vision weakens while hearing becomes more important. Early humans likely depended heavily on sound after dark because firelight illuminated only small areas. Hearing offered warnings about approaching animals, shifting weather, or movement outside the shelter. A quiet winter landscape therefore created a strange contradiction. Silence could suggest safety because nothing dangerous seemed nearby, but it could also produce tension because the absence of sound removed information the brain expected to receive. This uncertainty may have made winter nights feel emotionally stretched. The mind remained attentive, while the environment provided almost nothing to respond to. Researchers studying sensory deprivation often describe how reduced external stimulation increases inward awareness. Thoughts become more vivid, memories return more easily. Small worries feel larger in quiet environments. Early humans probably experienced similar mental shifts during long winter evenings. Once practical tasks ended and darkness settled fully around the shelter, there were few distractions separating people from their own thoughts. The silence outside may have encouraged reflection simply because there was little else competing for attention. Winter nights were not empty in the modern sense of boredom. They were filled with stillness, waiting, and awareness. The body remained near the fire. The ears listened into darkness. The mind wandered slowly through memory, observation, and anticipation of dawn. In this way, silence itself may have contributed to the feeling that winter nights were endless. Without constant sensory interruption, time lost its usual rhythm. Moments no longer flowed quickly from one event into another. Instead, they expanded into longer stretches of awareness. A single gust of wind or crack from the fire might briefly interrupt minutes of near-total stillness. The contrast made those quiet intervals feel even larger. For early humans, winter was therefore not only a colder season, it was a slower sensory world. Darkness reduced vision, cold reduced movement, silence reduced stimulation. Together, these changes transformed the experience of night into something unusually vast and difficult to measure. The night did not simply last longer on the horizon. It entered the mind differently, surrounding human awareness with enough stillness that even time itself could begin to feel suspended inside the cold. Fire changed human history so deeply that it is difficult to imagine prehistoric life without it. It provided warmth, protection, cooked food, and extended human activity beyond sunset. Yet during winter nights, fire could not fully defeat darkness. Its light was powerful only at close distance. Beyond a small glowing circle, the night remained almost completely untouched. For early humans, this contrast may have made winter darkness feel even larger rather than smaller. Modern lighting fills entire rooms, streets, and cities with steady illumination. A single switch can erase darkness across great distances. Ancient fire behaved very differently. Most prehistoric fires illuminated only a limited area, and their brightness constantly shifted. Flames flickered, smoke moved unpredictably, wood collapsed inward as it burned. Shadows stretched and disappeared across cave walls, shelters, and nearby ground. Even a strong fire could leave much of the surrounding environment invisible. Archaeological evidence from prehistoric campsites shows that fire was usually concentrated in central locations where people gathered closely around it. This suggests that warmth and visibility rapidly weakened with distance. In practical terms, early humans often lived beside islands of light floating inside enormous darkness. The human eye also struggles more in firelight than many people realize. Fire produces uneven illumination with constant motion and deep contrast between bright and dark areas. Unlike daylight, which reveals landscapes clearly, firelight distorts depth and detail. Objects outside the brightest zone quickly lose shape. Faces become partially shadowed. Movement at the edge of visibility can appear uncertain or exaggerated. During winter nights, when surrounding darkness lasted many hours, this limited visual field may have influenced how humans emotionally experienced space itself. The world beyond the fire did not disappear completely, but it became unreachable to sight. That invisibility carried psychological weight. Human beings rely heavily on vision to feel oriented and safe. When visibility shrinks, awareness often expands toward imagined possibilities outside the visible area. Anthropologists studying traditional fire-based societies have observed that nighttime behavior near fire differs greatly from daytime behavior. Attention narrows inward, groups stay physically closer together, movement becomes cautious. The fire acts almost like a boundary separating temporary safety from the unknown beyond it. Early humans likely experienced this boundary intensely during winter because darkness arrived earlier and remained much longer. A summer night might still contain moonlight, warmer air, or lingering environmental activity. Winter often reduced all three. Thick cloud cover, storms, or dense forests could leave areas outside the firelight almost entirely black. This meant that fire did not remove darkness from the environment. It merely carved out a small temporary refuge inside it. The limited reach of firelight also affected how time was perceived. During daylight, the eye continuously scans long distances, tracking movement across landscapes and sky. These visual changes help the brain organize time naturally. Firelight compressed perception into a much smaller area. Instead of watching horizons or changing weather, Early humans may have spent long winter evenings watching flames themselves. The fire became the primary visible source of movement. Embers shifted, smoke drifted upward, sparks rose briefly and vanished. In an environment with few other visual changes, these small motions may have taken on unusual importance. Hours could pass while attention remained fixed on subtle details inside the fire. Modern neuroscience suggests that repetitive low-stimulation visual environments can alter subjective time perception, often making periods feel extended or dreamlike. Firelight may have contributed to this effect during long winter nights. There was also an unavoidable emotional truth surrounding ancient fire. It could fail, wood ran out, rain or snow complicated fuel gathering, wind could weaken flames, or fill shelters with smoke. Keeping fire alive through winter nights demanded constant attention and experience. Archaeological evidence from early human sites often shows repeated use of hearths over long periods, suggesting how essential fire maintenance became for survival. Yet no matter how carefully it was managed, the fire remained fragile compared to the vast darkness around it. A few glowing logs could preserve warmth and visibility for a group, but they could not transform the night itself. Beyond the immediate light, winter continued unchanged. The cold remained waiting outside. The unseen landscape stretched outward beyond human sight. This may be one reason winter nights felt endless to early humans. Fire gave comfort, but it also revealed the scale of what comfort could not reach. The small circle of light did not erase darkness. It measured it. Every flicker illuminated only how much night still surrounded the human world, extending silently beyond the limits of flame and vision. Keeping a fire alive through a winter night was not a simple task for early humans. Modern people often imagine prehistoric fire as something permanent and stable, burning endlessly at the center of ancient shelters. In reality, maintaining fire required constant labor, planning, and resources. A fire could provide warmth and light, but only as long as fuel remained dry enough to burn and someone remained attentive enough to protect it. During winter, this challenge became much harder because cold and darkness increased human dependence on flames at the exact time when gathering fuel often became more difficult. Wood changes during winter. Rain, snow, and frozen ground can leave branches damp or buried beneath ice. Strong winds make fire less stable. In heavily wooded regions, people may have needed to travel farther to collect usable fuel after nearby resources were exhausted. Archaeological evidence from prehistoric campsites suggests repeated organization around hearths, implying that fire maintenance was a continuous part of daily survival rather than an occasional activity. Early humans likely spent large amounts of time preparing for night long before darkness arrived. Fuel had to be gathered, dried when possible, carried back to shelter, and rationed carefully. A winter fire was valuable partly because it consumed resources so quickly. This created an important psychological reality. Firelight did not guarantee comfort for the entire night. Every burning log represented time slowly disappearing. As flames weakened, people were forced to decide whether to add more fuel or conserve what remained for later hours. In long winters, fuel shortages could become dangerous. This meant that nighttime warmth was often uncertain. The fire beside a group was not an unlimited source of protection. It was temporary, fragile, and dependent on constant human effort. That uncertainty may have changed how early humans experienced darkness emotionally. A modern person rarely worries that all light and heat inside a home will disappear before morning. Early humans likely carried that awareness continuously during winter nights. The weakening of flames was not merely visual. It signaled the gradual return of cold. Researchers studying traditional societies dependent on open fires note that nighttime temperature changes strongly influence sleep quality and behavior. As fires burn lower, People wake more often, adjust position, add fuel, or move closer together for warmth. Sleep becomes lighter and more interrupted. This means winter nights may have felt longer, partly because people experience them in fragments rather than in deep, uninterrupted rest. Hours became noticeable because bodies repeatedly returned to wakefulness inside darkness. The fire itself also demanded attention in ways modern heating systems do not. Flames had to be monitored to avoid accidental spread, excessive smoke, or complete extinction. Inside caves or enclosed shelters, smoke accumulation could become dangerous if ventilation was poor. Too much fire created discomfort. Too little fire invited cold. Maintaining balance required awareness even during exhaustion. Some individuals in a group may have remained partially alert through parts of the night, specifically to tend the fire when necessary. In this sense, winter darkness could never be fully ignored. Even while resting, humans remained connected to the condition of the flames. Fire also shaped social rhythms during long nights. Once fuel was added, people may have watched the flames closely because they represented survival itself. The gradual collapse of burning wood, shifting embers, and changing brightness marked the slow passage of time more visibly than anything else in the shelter. A strong flame brought temporary reassurance. A dimming fire reminded everyone how much darkness still remained before dawn. This emotional dependence on fire may explain why ancient hearths appear so consistently across archaeological sites. They were not merely tools for cooking. They were central points around which winter existence organized itself. Yet despite all effort, no fire lasted forever on its own. Eventually every flame weakened, unless fed again. This constant cycle may have contributed to the feeling that winter nights were endless. Human beings had to actively resist darkness hour after hour instead of simply waiting for morning in comfort. Each return of cold air after the fire dimmed reminded the body that the night was still continuing. In warmer seasons, the consequences of a weakening fire might have been manageable. During winter, especially in colder prehistoric climates, the difference between strong fire and fading embers could shape whether sleep remained possible at all. The night, therefore, became a sequence of temporary victories against cold, rather than a continuous state of safety. Fire gave humans remarkable power compared to other animals, but it did not free them completely from winter darkness. It demanded labor, fuel, wakefulness, and caution. And because its protection constantly threatened to disappear, early humans may have experienced winter nights not as passive stretches of time, but as long periods requiring endurance and careful attention until daylight finally returned. Even with fire, winter darkness always remained nearby. Early humans could push it back for a few meters, but they could never fully remove it from their world. This constant presence of darkness shaped how nights were experienced emotionally, physically, and mentally. The fire created a temporary center of visibility, yet beyond that small circle, the environment remained unknown. The farther the eye looked from the flames, the less certain the world became. In winter, when nights lasted longer and cold reduced movement outside shelters, this unseen space may have felt enormous. Human vision depends heavily on contrast and depth. Daylight reveals distance clearly because sunlight spreads evenly across landscapes. Firelight does the opposite. It isolates fragments of the environment while leaving everything else concealed. A nearby hand may appear bright, while a few steps farther away dissolve into shadow. During long winter nights, early humans likely spent many hours inside this limited visual world. They could hear wind outside. They might sense cold air entering through openings, yet most of the surrounding landscape remained invisible. The darkness beyond the flames was not empty, it was simply hidden. This distinction matters because the human brain reacts differently to visible absence than to uncertainty. Modern neuroscience shows that when information is incomplete, the mind often fills gaps with heightened vigilance and imagination. Darkness encourages attention toward what cannot be seen. Early humans depended on this vigilance for survival. Predators, weather changes, or unfamiliar movement outside the shelter could become threats very quickly during winter. The brain therefore had reason to remain partially alert, even during rest. Fire reduced danger, but it could not erase the possibility that something existed beyond its light. This may be one reason winter nights felt psychologically larger than their measurable length. Darkness occupied mental space continuously because it surrounded human awareness from every direction outside the fire's glow. Winter conditions intensified this effect by limiting visibility even further. Snowstorms, dense clouds, fog, and long nights reduced natural sources of light, such as stars or moonlight. In forests, bare trees formed dark shapes that blended into one another after sunset. Open, frozen landscapes could become equally disorienting because snow reflected weak light unevenly across great distances. In either case, humans rarely experienced a clear view of the wider world at night during severe winter conditions. The environment seemed to end at the edge of visibility. Beyond that edge remained uncertainty. Anthropologists studying traditional nighttime behavior often note how humans naturally stay closer to light sources after dark, even when no immediate danger exists. This instinct likely developed over thousands of years in environments where visibility strongly affected survival. For early humans, the fire was not merely convenient. It defined the boundary between the known and the unknown during winter nights. Inside the light, faces, tools, and familiar shapes remained visible. Outside it, the world dissolved into suggestion and shadow. This division may have influenced emotional perception of time. The mind tends to relax when environments appear stable and understandable. It tends to slow and monitor carefully when uncertainty increases. Long winter nights offered extended periods of partial uncertainty. People could not fully observe the landscape around them, yet they remained aware that it continued beyond sight. The body rested, but attention may never have relaxed completely. This state of low-level vigilance can make time feel extended because awareness remains active rather than fully disengaged. Researchers studying modern sleep in unfamiliar or threatening environments observe that humans often remain more sensitive to sound and movement under uncertain conditions. Early humans living through winter darkness likely experienced similar patterns regularly. The unseen environment beyond the fire may also have encouraged symbolic thinking and imagination. Humans naturally search for meaning in unclear visual spaces. Shadows shift, shapes appear briefly and disappear again. Firelight itself creates moving patterns that can alter perception of nearby surroundings. Over long nights, these conditions may have deepened the emotional sense that darkness possessed a presence of its own. Not necessarily supernatural in the dramatic sense modern stories often portray, but vast, unknowable, and beyond human control. Winter repeatedly reminded early humans that their ability to shape the environment remained limited. They could gather together, build shelters, and maintain fire, but they could not shorten the night itself. Dawn arrived according to forces far larger than human effort. Perhaps this is why winter nights felt endless. Fire gave warmth and visibility, yet at the same time it revealed how little of the world humans could actually hold back from darkness. Every flickering flame existed beside a much larger, unseen space waiting patiently around it, stretching beyond the limits of sight until morning slowly returned again. Modern people often imagine sleep as one long, uninterrupted block that begins at night and ends in the morning. Yet historians and sleep researchers increasingly believe that human sleep was not always organized this way. Before electric lighting reshaped daily life, many societies appear to have experienced more flexible and segmented patterns of rest, especially during long winter nights. For early humans, sleep may have been less like disappearing for 8 continuous hours and more like drifting in and out of different states of rest across darkness that lasted far longer than the body could remain fully asleep. Winter made this difference especially important because the nights themselves extended beyond the limits of comfortable, uninterrupted sleep. Human beings are deeply connected to natural light cycles. In modern cities, artificial illumination pushes activity later into the night and compresses the amount of darkness people experience. Early humans lived under the opposite conditions. Once sunset arrived, particularly during winter, darkness dominated the environment for many continuous hours. In some northern regions, winter nights lasted far longer than the average duration of human sleep. This created a simple reality. Even after sleeping for several hours, many people would still wake into complete darkness with much of the night remaining. Historical records from pre-industrial Europe describe patterns, sometimes called segmented sleep or biphasic sleep, in which people slept for a first sleep, woke for a period during the middle of the night, then returned to a second sleep before dawn. During these waking periods, people might quietly think, talk, pray, tend fires, or simply rest in silence. Researchers debate how universal these patterns were, but many agree that artificial lighting likely changed older human sleep rhythms significantly. While there are no written records from prehistoric humans themselves, it is plausible that long winter nights encouraged similar cycles of waking and sleeping long before recorded history. The body does not always remain unconscious simply because darkness continues. Once enough rest has occurred, the brain may naturally return to lighter awareness, even while the environment remains night dark outside. Winter cold may have strengthened this effect. Temperature influences sleep quality strongly. Modern sleep science shows that people sleep best within relatively narrow temperature ranges. Environments that become too cold increase awakenings and lighter sleep stages. Early humans resting near open fires probably experienced fluctuating temperatures throughout the night as flames weakened and revived. Someone sleeping warmly beside strong embers might later wake as the fire dimmed and colder air reached the shelter. These interruptions may have divided winter nights into multiple periods of rest and wakefulness rather than one continuous sleep. The structure of prehistoric shelters also likely affected sleep. Caves, hide-covered shelters, or temporary dwellings provided protection, but rarely perfect comfort. Smoke, cold drafts, uneven ground, nearby movement, and shared sleeping spaces all created conditions very different from modern insulated bedrooms. Sleep in these environments may have been lighter and more responsive to surrounding changes. Anthropologists studying traditional societies today often observe flexible sleep schedules shaped by environmental conditions rather than strict clock-based routines. People may rest, wake briefly, listen, shift position, or tend fires without treating these awakenings as unusual. For early humans, winter nights may therefore have felt long, partly because people experienced more of them consciously. Instead of losing awareness until morning, humans likely moved repeatedly between sleep and quiet wakefulness. This pattern changes how time is perceived. A fully uninterrupted sleep compresses subjective experience. A person closes their eyes and suddenly morning arrives. Interrupted sleep does the opposite. It divides darkness into remembered segments. The mind notices the night because it repeatedly returns to awareness inside it. Someone waking during a winter night thousands of years ago may have heard the wind outside, watched low flames shifting across shelter walls, adjusted animal hides for warmth, and listened to others breathing nearby before slowly drifting back towards sleep again. Each awakening reminded the body that the night was still continuing. In this way, winter darkness was not simply endured unconsciously, it was experienced in stages. Hours became emotionally larger because people repeatedly encountered them. The long winter night surrounded human rest instead of disappearing beneath it. Sleep did not erase darkness completely. It only offered temporary passage through parts of it before awareness quietly surfaced again inside the cold and silence waiting before dawn. Waking during a winter night may have been one of the most ordinary experiences in prehistoric life. For modern people, waking at 3 in the morning often feels unnatural or stressful because society expects sleep to remain continuous until sunrise. Early humans lived under very different conditions. Long darkness, unstable temperatures, and dependence on fire likely made brief awakenings common rather than unusual. During winter especially, the body may have moved repeatedly between sleep and awareness as the environment shifted around it through the night. Cold was one of the strongest reasons for this interruption. Human sleep depends partly on the body's ability to maintain stable internal temperature. When surrounding air becomes too cold, the brain increases alertness because survival begins to take priority over deep rest. Early humans sleeping near open fires probably experienced changing warmth hour by hour. A strong fire early in the evening might create relative comfort, but later, as fuel burned down, colder air slowly returned to the shelter. Someone sleeping near the outer edge of the group may have felt this first. Fingers, feet, and exposed skin cool quickly during sleep because the body naturally lowers core temperature at night. A person waking into winter darkness could immediately become aware of cold pressing against the body from outside the remaining warmth of the fire. These awakenings were likely quiet and slow rather than dramatic. There were no alarms or artificial sounds pulling people sharply awake. Awareness may have surfaced gradually. Eyes opened to dim embers. Breathing from others nearby filled the shelter. Smoke drifted faintly upward. Outside, wind or deep silence reminded the group that darkness still continued beyond the walls of light. In such moments, the mind entered a strange state between sleep and full wakefulness. Modern sleep researchers sometimes describe this condition as a transitional awareness in which thought becomes reflective and time feels different from ordinary daytime experience. Early humans probably spent many winter hours inside this quiet mental space. Fire maintenance likely contributed to these interruptions as well. Someone needed to notice when flames weakened too much. A few additional branches placed carefully onto embers could preserve warmth for hours, while neglect might allow the fire to fade dangerously low. Archaeological evidence from ancient hearths suggests that fires were repeatedly tended over long periods rather than left unattended. This means that winter nights may have contained cycles of partial waking connected directly to survival tasks. Sleep and responsibility remained intertwined. Even resting humans stayed loosely connected to the condition of the environment around them. Winter shelters themselves may also have encouraged lighter sleep. Unlike modern homes, prehistoric shelters allowed more environmental changes to enter human awareness. Wind shifted temperatures suddenly. Snow or rain altered sound patterns outside. Smoke thickened or thinned, depending on airflow. Nearby bodies moved during sleep. Children woke. Animals sometimes remained close to shelters. The night was never perfectly controlled. Instead, humans rested inside living environments that constantly changed in subtle ways. This made complete unconsciousness less reliable than it often feels today. Long winter darkness may therefore have become deeply familiar rather than empty. People did not simply pass through it unknowingly. They encountered it again and again, each time awareness returned during the night. A person might wake, stare quietly toward fading firelight, listen to distant weather, then slowly fall asleep once more. Hours later, the process could repeat. These repeated awakenings divided the night into remembered sections. The darkness gained texture because it contained multiple experiences rather than one uninterrupted absence of consciousness. This pattern may help explain why winter nights felt endless to early humans. Continuous sleep compresses time emotionally. Interrupted sleep expands it. Each return to awareness reminds the mind that night still remains unfinished. Modern people occasionally experience this sensation during insomnia or unfamiliar environments, when the night seems to stretch far longer than the clock suggests. Early humans may have known this feeling regularly throughout winter seasons. Yet these waking periods were not necessarily always frightening. Sometimes they may have carried a calm and reflective quality. The fire still glowed faintly. Familiar breathing filled the darkness nearby. The group remained together inside shared shelter, while cold air stayed outside. In those quiet moments between sleep and wakefulness, humans may have experienced the winter night not only as hardship, but as a long suspended state, unlike any part of daytime life. Time slowed. Movement disappeared. The world narrowed into warmth, shadow, and waiting. Morning still felt distant, but the mind drifted gently through darkness, instead of fully escaping it through uninterrupted sleep. Between one period of sleep and the next, early humans may have experienced long stretches of quiet wakefulness unlike anything common in modern life. These moments were not fully daytime consciousness, yet they were not complete sleep either. During winter nights, especially in colder climates, people could find themselves awake beside fading embers, with hours of darkness still remaining before sunrise. There was often little to do except remain still, conserve warmth, and wait. In these slow intervals, the human mind may have begun experiencing time in a deeply unusual. Modern life rarely allows true inactivity. Even brief awakenings during the night are usually interrupted quickly by artificial light, phones, clocks, or surrounding noise. Early humans had none of these constant signals. A person waking during winter darkness may have remained in near silence for long periods without knowing exactly how much time had passed. The body rested, but awareness drifted quietly through cold air, low firelight, and distant sounds outside the shelter. Without strong stimulation, the brain enters a slower mode of attention. Thoughts loosen from structured tasks and move more freely through memory, observation, and imagination. Researchers studying wakefulness during the biological night have observed that people often experience altered perception during these hours. Time can feel stretched. Thoughts become reflective. Emotional sensitivity sometimes increases. The boundary between dreaming and waking thought becomes softer. Early humans likely knew this mental state intimately during winter seasons because darkness lasted so much longer than modern human schedules are designed to accommodate. The environment reinforced this slowed awareness. By the deepest part of night, most movement had stopped completely. The fire burned low to preserve fuel. Outside, animals were quieter, and frozen landscapes produced fewer sounds. The body itself became heavy from cold and interrupted sleep. In this condition, even small sensations became noticeable: the shifting of wood in the fire, a gust of wind entering briefly through shelter openings, someone nearby turning during sleep. Long silence between these moments may have made each one feel unusually important. When little changes in the environment, human awareness stretches outward across longer periods of waiting. This may be one reason winter nights felt endless to early humans, not because something dramatic happened constantly, but because so little happened for such extended periods of time. Sleep historians sometimes note that pre-industrial nighttime wakefulness was not always treated as a problem. In some historical societies, the middle of the night became a quiet interval for reflection, conversation, prayer, or intimacy before people returned to sleep again. Early humans almost certainly lacked the same cultural structures recorded in later civilizations, but they still experienced the same biological reality of long darkness and intermittent wakefulness. Winter nights offered more hours than the body could continuously sleep through. As a result, people may have simply accepted these periods of awareness as part of existence itself, yet acceptance did not necessarily make the nights feel short. On the contrary, awareness inside darkness may have deepened the emotional sense of duration. The human brain measures time partly through memory. Events that contain many remembered moments often feel longer in retrospect than periods that pass unconsciously. Interrupted winter nights created many small moments of awareness, waking from cold, adjusting position, listening to weather, feeding the fire, staring into embers, drifting back towards sleep. Together, these fragments may have stretched the subjective experience of nighttime far beyond its measured hours. A long winter night was not a single block of darkness. It became a chain of remembered intervals linked together by silence and waiting. There is also reason to believe that these quiet hours influence the inner life of human beings. Darkness removes many external distractions, leaving the mind more exposed to its own thoughts. Anthropologists and psychologists both recognize that environments with low stimulation often encourage reflection and internal storytelling. During winter nights, early humans may have spent long periods simply observing thought itself while resting beside others in near silence. Memory, fear, planning, grief, curiosity, and imagination all become more noticeable when the outside world grows still. The night may therefore have felt endless, partly because it opened a space where attention turned inward without interruption. Dawn eventually arrived, but slowly. Before morning came full light, there were long stretches where almost nothing visibly changed. The fire glowed weakly, shadows remained deep. The sky outside barely softened at the horizon. Humans waiting through these final hours may have felt suspended between sleeping and waking, between darkness and day. Winter nights did not merely surround the body. They surrounded consciousness itself, stretching awareness gently across silence until the first light finally returned to make the world feel measurable once again. Winter changes sound long before humans consciously notice it. The world does not become completely silent, but many of the small continuous noises that fill warmer seasons begin to disappear. Early humans likely experienced this transformation with unusual intensity because their survival depended so heavily on listening to the environment around them. In winter, the landscape itself behaved differently. Frozen ground absorbed vibration in new ways. Snow softened footsteps and muted distant movement. Insects vanished. Birds migrated or reduced activity. Water slowed beneath ice. Entire nights could pass with remarkably little sound beyond wind and the occasional crack of freezing wood or shifting earth. This quietness altered not only the environment, but the human mind moving inside it. Modern life surrounds people with almost constant background noise. Electricity hums through buildings. Traffic moves continuously. Machines, voices, and distant activity fill even the quietest cities. Early humans knew a very different acoustic world. During winter nights, especially far from large animal migrations or moving water, darkness could settle into deep stillness for hours at a time. Human hearing becomes more sensitive in low-light environments because vision loses reliability after sunset. The brain unconsciously shifts attention towards sound in order to detect movement or danger nearby. Yet winter often removed the very sounds the brain expected to monitor. This created a strange psychological effect. The environment felt both calmer and more uncertain at the same time. Anthropologists and psychologists both note that silence affects human awareness in complex ways. Short periods of quiet may feel peaceful, but prolonged silence often increases sensitivity to small sensations and internal thought. People begin noticing breathing, heartbeat, shifting posture, and distant faint sounds that normally disappear beneath busier environments. Early humans spending long winter nights beside fires may have experienced this sharpened awareness regularly. Once conversation slowed and most activity ended, silence itself became one of the strongest features of the night. Small noises gained unusual importance because they interrupted such long stretches of stillness. A branch snapping outside a shelter could immediately draw attention. The movement of embers collapsing inward became noticeable. Wind against stone or animal hide might seem louder simply because nothing else competed with it. Winter amplified these effects because cold reduced movement across entire landscapes. Human beings are accustomed to measuring time partly through environmental activity. During warmer seasons, sounds overlap continuously. Flowing water, moving leaves, insects, birds, distant animal calls. Each sound subtly marks change and movement through the world. Winter removes many of these markers. Without them, the brain receives fewer signals organizing the passage of time. Silence stretches awareness across longer intervals because there is less sensory information dividing one moment from another. Researchers studying isolation environments often observe that reduced sensory stimulation changes time perception dramatically. People left in quiet and darkness frequently lose accurate awareness of duration. Hours feel longer, thoughts become slower and more reflective. Early humans living through repeated winter seasons may have known this sensation deeply, even if they lacked language to describe it scientifically. The night felt endless, partly because silence expanded attention itself. The mind had room to linger on each sensation without interruption. Snow likely intensified this experience in many cold regions. Fresh snow absorbs sound efficiently, creating environments that feel acoustically softened and distant. Modern people occasionally notice this effect during winter storms, when cities suddenly seem unnaturally quiet. For early humans without artificial noise, the effect may have been far stronger. A snowy winter night could erase much of the ordinary soundscape entirely. Outside the firelight, the world became dark and muffled at the same time. This combination may have created a powerful feeling of separation from the outside environment. The shelter felt isolated inside vast silence. Yet silence did not always mean safety. Human survival depended on detecting danger early, and total quiet can sometimes feel unsettling precisely because it removes information. The brain continues listening even when there is little to hear. This prolonged attention without clear signals may have contributed to the emotional heaviness of winter nights. Awareness remained active, while the environment offered very little response. In this way, winter silence shaped human consciousness slowly and continuously. Darkness reduced sight, cold reduced movement, silence reduced stimulation. Together they created nights where time no longer flowed through constant external change. Instead, awareness drifted through long, quiet intervals, where even the smallest sound seemed to emerge from enormous stillness. For early humans, winter nights may have felt endless not only because they were long, but because silence removed many of the ordinary signs that life and time were still moving forward beyond the darkness. The human brain does not fully relax in darkness. Even during sleep, part of the mind continues monitoring the environment for changes in sound, temperature, movement, or threat. This tendency developed over hundreds of thousands of years because early humans survived partly by remaining sensitive to danger during vulnerable hours of the night. Winter intensified this ancient alertness. Long darkness, reduced visibility, and quieter landscapes forced the brain to rely more heavily on limited information, making awareness sharper even when the body was exhausted. Modern neuroscience shows that human attention changes significantly in low-light environments. When vision becomes unreliable, the brain automatically increases focus on uncertain sensory signals. Small sounds seem more important. Ambiguous shapes attract attention more easily. The mind begins scanning for patterns because incomplete information can represent potential danger. Early humans experienced these conditions every winter night. Firelight illuminated only nearby space. Beyond it remained darkness where movement could not easily be identified. In warmer seasons, environmental sounds and activity may have balanced this uncertainty somewhat. Winter often removed those reassuring signs of life, leaving long periods where the brain stayed alert inside silence. This alertness was not always conscious fear. More often it was a steady state of readiness. Anthropologists studying traditional hunter-gatherer societies note that sleep in natural environments tends to remain lighter and more flexible than the deeply isolated sleep common in modern industrial societies. Humans sleeping in groups, near open landscapes, and without secure artificial barriers often maintain greater environmental responsiveness. Early humans likely experienced this constantly during winter. A strange sound outside the shelter, shifting wind, or changes in the fire could immediately pull attention back toward the environment. The brain remained connected to darkness even while resting. Winter nights may therefore have felt endless, partly because the mind never fully detached from them. Darkness also changes emotional perception because it limits certainty. During daytime, humans gather enormous amounts of information visually without effort. The brain quickly recognizes landscapes, distances, faces, and movement. At night, especially in winter conditions, much of this information disappears. The mind is forced to interpret partial signals instead of clear images. Psychological studies show that humans often respond to uncertainty by imagining possibilities beyond the available evidence. In darkness, a vague shape may appear larger or more threatening than it truly is. A small sound can seem distant one moment and nearby the next. Early humans depended on cautious interpretation because ignoring possible danger carried serious consequences. Yet maintaining this level of awareness for long hours likely placed emotional weight on winter nights. The darkness demanded attention without offering clear answers. Cold strengthened this vigilance further. Physical discomfort makes the brain less willing to enter deep relaxation. Someone lying awake beside fading embers while cold air slowly entered a shelter may have remained highly sensitive to environmental changes. Even slight movements or noises could interrupt drifting sleep. Researchers studying stress and environmental exposure note that uncertain conditions often prolong low-level alertness in humans. Early winter nights contained many uncertainties at once: weakening firelight, changing weather, unseen landscapes, and long hours before dawn. The body rested only partially because awareness remained connected to survival. Silence complicated this experience in subtle ways. When the environment becomes extremely quiet, the brain often increases internal sensitivity. People notice faint sounds that would normally disappear beneath background noise. Breathing, shifting fabric, cracking wood, or distant wind become emotionally amplified because they occur inside long stretches of stillness. Early humans likely listened carefully during winter nights because hearing offered one of the few remaining ways to monitor the invisible world outside the fire's reach. Yet the quieter the environment became, the more noticeable each interruption felt. A single, unexpected sound could immediately transform calm into alertness. This pattern may explain why winter nights felt mentally exhausting despite long periods of physical inactivity. The body remained still, but the brain continued listening. Human beings today still carry traces of this ancient sensitivity. Many people sleep more lightly in unfamiliar places. Sudden noises during the night quickly trigger alertness. Darkness can intensify anxiety, even when no clear threat exists. These reactions are not signs of irrational weakness. They are ancient survival systems that evolved in environments where nighttime awareness mattered deeply. Early humans spent winter after winter living inside these conditions. Long darkness trained the brain to remain attentive because the environment beyond the fire remained uncertain until morning returned. In this way, winter nights became psychologically larger than ordinary nights. They demanded patience, caution, and sustained awareness across hours with little visible change. The brain stayed awake inside the silence of darkness, listening carefully to a world it could barely see, waiting slowly for daylight to make the environment understandable again. As winter nights grew longer, early humans may have spent more time inside their own thoughts than at any other point of the year. Darkness and silence did not only change the outside world, they changed the rhythm of the human mind itself. During daylight, survival demanded constant attention toward movement, travel, tools, weather, and other people. The brain remained occupied by immediate tasks. Winter nights removed many of those demands for long stretches of time. Once fires were maintained and shelters secured, there were often hours where little physical action remained possible. In those quiet periods, awareness naturally turned inward. Modern psychology suggests that the human mind behaves differently in environments with low stimulation. When fewer external signals compete for attention, internal thought becomes more noticeable. Memories surface more easily. Emotions linger longer. Small concerns expand because silence leaves space for them. Early humans likely experienced this effect intensely during winter because the season reduced activity across entire landscapes. Darkness lasted longer than the body could comfortably sleep through. The world outside the fire became difficult to navigate safely. As a result, humans spent extended periods awake but physically inactive, listening to silence while the mind continued moving internally. This inward attention may have changed the emotional texture of winter nights. A person sitting quietly beside low embers could begin thinking about absent people, failed hunts, changing seasons, injuries, or uncertain futures. Human beings naturally create meaning and reflection during periods of stillness. Anthropologists studying oral cultures often observe that nighttime encourages storytelling, memory sharing, and contemplation because external distractions become limited. Early humans may not have separated practical thought from emotional thought as modern people often do. In darkness, both likely blended together. The winter night created conditions where the mind wandered slowly through memory and imagination, while the body remained almost motionless. Neuroscientists today understand that the brain continuously generates internal narratives, especially during low stimulation states. Modern people often avoid extended silence through constant activity, screens, conversation, or artificial sound. Early humans had no such barriers between consciousness and quiet. Winter forced long encounters with stillness. Over time, these experiences may have shaped not only emotion, but human cognition itself. Some researchers even suggest that reflective thought and complex storytelling may have been strengthened by the long evenings humans spent together around fires during prehistoric winters. Darkness reduced movement but expanded mental space. Fear may also have become more vivid during these hours. The human brain is highly sensitive to uncertainty, and darkness provides incomplete information continuously. During daylight, visible landscapes limit imagination because the environment appears clear. At night, especially beyond the reach of firelight, the unseen world remains open to interpretation. Small sounds, shifting shadows, or remembered dangers can grow emotionally larger in silence. Early humans depended on caution for survival, so the brain likely remained highly responsive to imagined possibilities during long winter nights. Yet the inward turn of the mind was not necessarily always negative. Quiet wakefulness may also have encouraged observation, emotional bonding, and gradual reflection about life itself. Archaeologists and anthropologists frequently note the importance of fire-centered social time in early human development. Winter nights brought people physically closer together for longer periods than warmer seasons often required. Inside shelters surrounded by darkness, humans listened to one another speak, breathe, sleep, and wait through the same long hours together. The mind during these nights may have moved repeatedly between private thought and shared presence. Someone staring into a fire could feel deeply alone inside memory one moment, then comforted by nearby human closeness the next. Time itself may have felt unusual in these conditions because internal thought changes time perception dramatically. A mind focused on action often experiences hours quickly. A reflective mind notices duration more slowly. Winter nights encouraged this slower awareness. The absence of strong external stimulation allowed attention to settle deeply into thoughts that daytime activity might normally interrupt. The night therefore expanded psychologically as much as physically. Dawn became something awaited not only because of light and warmth, but because daylight restored structure to consciousness itself. Morning brought movement, tasks, visible landscapes, and clearer orientation in time. Winter darkness removed those anchors for long periods, leaving humans suspended inside quieter forms of awareness. Perhaps this is why winter nights felt endless to early humans. The darkness did not merely surround their shelters. It opened vast stretches of uninterrupted thought where memory, fear, imagination, and reflection moved slowly through silence beside the fading fire, while the world outside remained hidden and still until dawn finally returned again. Winter nights did more than force early humans to stay close to fire. They may also have created the conditions that encouraged human storytelling itself. Long before written language existed, knowledge survived through memory and speech. People explained landscapes, animals, seasons, danger, and social rules by speaking to one another. During warmer months, much of life happened through movement across open environments. Hunting, gathering, traveling, and responding to changing weather occupied large parts of the day. Winter changed this rhythm. Darkness arrived earlier, cold reduced activity, and groups often remained together for longer periods after sunset. In these extended hours of stillness, human voices may have become one of the few things capable of filling the night. Anthropologists studying traditional oral societies frequently observe that storytelling becomes especially important during seasons of reduced outdoor labor. When movement slows, conversation expands. Winter naturally creates such conditions because survival encourages people to remain sheltered and conserve energy. Early humans may therefore have spent more continuous time listening to one another during winter nights than during any other season. The fire provided warmth and light, but voices provided structure inside the long darkness. A story divides time. It gives the mind sequence, expectation, and movement when the outside world remains still. This may have made storytelling emotionally valuable during nights that otherwise felt endless. Human beings are deeply responsive to narrative. Neuroscientists have shown that stories organize attention differently from isolated information. A sequence with memory, anticipation, and emotional meaning helps the brain remain engaged over time. Early humans did not need modern psychology to understand this effect consciously. They experienced it directly. A spoken memory, a hunting account, a warning about weather, or a retelling of ancestors could hold attention beside the fire while darkness continued outside. The story created motion inside a night where physical movement had become limited. In this sense, storytelling may have functioned partly as a psychological shelter against the overwhelming stillness of winter. The environment itself encouraged this behavior. Winter nights often lasted longer than the body could comfortably sleep through. As discussed earlier, people likely moved between periods of sleep and wakefulness across the night. During these waking hours, conversation may have naturally emerged. Someone tending the fire could speak softly. Others half awake nearby might listen or respond. Stories do not always begin as formal performances. Many likely emerged gradually from ordinary observation and memory, shared through repeated winters together. Archaeological evidence cannot preserve spoken words directly, but anthropologists often point toward the central role of evening fire gatherings in human cultural development. Firelight changes social behavior by drawing attention inward toward faces and voices. Winter intensified this effect because the surrounding darkness became larger and more isolating. Inside the shelter, the human voice remained one of the few stable forms of movement and connection. Stories also helped organize uncertainty. Winter brought danger, hunger, illness, and unpredictable weather. Human beings naturally search for explanation during difficult conditions. Narrative allows people to shape fear into patterns that feel understandable. Early myths, animal tales, seasonal beliefs, and ancestor memories may have partly emerged from repeated encounters with long nights where the environment felt vast and uncontrollable. Telling stories beside firelight transformed silence into shared meaning. The darkness remained outside, but human speech gave the group emotional continuity inside it. Children likely experienced winter nights through these spoken worlds as well. Before writing existed, nearly everything important had to be remembered through repetition and listening. Long evenings created opportunities for younger members of a group to absorb practical survival knowledge naturally through stories and conversation. Information about dangerous animals, migration patterns, landscapes, weather signs, and social expectations could all be woven into spoken memory. Winter, therefore, did not only preserve bodies around fire, it preserved culture itself. The night became a space where knowledge survived across generations because there was finally enough stillness for listening. Yet storytelling may also have deepened the strange feeling of timelessness during winter nights. A powerful story changes awareness of duration. People lose track of passing hours because attention enters imagined places, remembered events, and emotional images. Early humans, sitting together in darkness, may have drifted collectively through memory and imagination, while storms, cold, and silence continued outside unseen. The fire flickered, shadows moved across walls. Voices carried slowly through the shelter, while the night stretched onward beyond visibility. In that environment, stories may have become more than entertainment. They became a way for humans to mentally travel beyond the limits of the winter darkness surrounding them. And perhaps this is one reason long winter nights mattered so deeply in human history. The darkness forced people inward physically, but it may also have drawn human minds closer together through shared language, memory, and imagination beside the fire. Stories may have helped early humans survive winter in ways deeper than simple entertainment. During long nights, when darkness limited movement and cold reduced physical activity, spoken words could organize emotion, reduce tension, and strengthen the feeling that people were enduring the season together rather than alone. Modern psychology recognizes that human beings cope with uncertainty more effectively when experiences are shared through narrative. Early humans likely discovered this slowly across generations without needing formal theories about the mind. A voice beside the fire could make the night feel smaller. A familiar story could create emotional structure inside hours that otherwise felt empty and endless. Winter naturally produced conditions where this emotional role of storytelling became important. Darkness arrived early, and much of the outside world disappeared from view. Hunting opportunities decreased in some regions. Storms, cold, and food uncertainty placed constant pressure on survival. In such conditions, silence alone may not always have been comforting. Long stretches of quiet awareness can intensify fear and loneliness because the mind begins focusing on uncertainty. Stories interrupted that process. They directed attention toward memory, imagination, humor, instruction, or shared identity, instead of leaving individuals alone with the darkness. Anthropologists studying oral traditions often note that storytelling serves social and psychological functions at the same time. It preserves knowledge while also reinforcing emotional connection within the group. Early humans may have depended on this connection deeply during winter months because survival required cooperation. A group that trusted one another shared food more effectively, protected fires more carefully, and endured hardship with greater stability. Stories helped strengthen these bonds because listening together creates synchronized emotional experience. Around a fire, multiple people could focus on the same images, memories, or lessons at once while the dangerous environment outside remained temporarily distant. In this way, storytelling may have softened the emotional weight of winter nights. The structure of stories themselves may also have mattered. Human narratives usually move through tension towards some form of resolution, even if temporary. A hunt succeeds, a traveler returns, a danger is escaped, a lesson is learned. During winter, these patterns may have provided psychological reassurance because the season often felt uncertain and difficult to control. Listening to a narrative with direction and meaning could create the feeling that time itself was moving somewhere instead of remaining trapped inside endless darkness. A story has progression. Winter nights often did not. This contrast may explain why spoken narratives became so powerful in firelit environments. Stories gave movement to hours where the outside world seemed frozen and still. Researchers studying modern stress responses also observe that familiar routines and repeated narratives can calm the nervous system. Children especially become more relaxed when hearing stories they already know, because predictability reduces uncertainty. Early human groups likely repeated important stories many times across winters. Familiar voices and remembered sequences may have provided emotional steadiness during nights when cold, hunger, or weather created anxiety. The repetition itself mattered. Repeated stories turn unpredictable time into recognizable structure. A winter night, listening to a familiar tale may have felt less overwhelming because the mind already knew where the story would lead, even if dawn still remained far away. Firelight probably strengthened this emotional effect. Neuroscientists have found that low flickering light encourages calmer and more reflective states of attention compared to bright artificial illumination. Early humans listening to stories beside flames experienced a sensory environment unlike modern entertainment. Darkness surrounded the group completely. Faces appeared and disappeared softly within moving light. Voices traveled through still air without competing noise. These conditions may have made spoken narratives feel immersive in a very physical sense. The story did not exist separately from the night. It filled the night itself. Yet stories may have done something even more important during winter. They reminded humans that others had survived before them. Oral traditions often preserve memory across generations. A difficult season becomes easier to endure when people believe it has been endured before. Early humans listening to stories about ancestors, past winters, dangerous journeys, or recovered hardship may have gained emotional continuity through those memories. The darkness outside still felt vast, but the story connected present suffering to a longer human experience. Perhaps this is why storytelling became so closely tied to fire and winter throughout human history. Long nights created emotional pressure that silence alone could not always carry. Stories transformed waiting into shared experience. They organized fear into meaning, divided endless hours into remembered sequences, and reminded people gathered around fading embers that they were not facing the darkness entirely alone. Long winter nights may have helped human memory survive across generations. Before writing existed, nearly everything important had to remain alive inside the minds of living people. Knowledge about dangerous animals, Migration routes, changing seasons, edible plants, weather patterns, tool making, and social customs could not be stored in books or maps. If memories disappeared, survival knowledge disappeared with them. Winter created unusual conditions for preserving these memories because darkness forced people into longer periods of shared stillness, where listening became one of the few activities that could continue deep into the night. Anthropologists studying oral cultures often emphasize that spoken knowledge survives through repetition. Stories, songs, and repeated narratives strengthen memory because rhythm and familiarity help the brain retain information across long periods of time. Early humans likely repeated important stories during many winter seasons. Children listening beside the fire may have heard the same warnings, hunting accounts, ancestor stories, and survival lessons again and again throughout their lives. Winter nights, therefore, became more than empty waiting. They became environments where human memory was maintained collectively. The darkness slowed physical activity, but it allowed spoken knowledge to continue moving between generations. Firelight played an important role in this process. Evening gatherings naturally focused attention inward toward nearby voices. Without artificial entertainment or constant movement, listening itself became central to social life after sunset. Winter increased this focus because people remained sheltered together for longer hours. During daylight, practical survival tasks often separated individuals across landscapes. Winter nights brought them back into shared space. In this environment, memory was not private. It was communal. A story remembered by one person could be corrected, expanded, or reinforced by others listening nearby. Knowledge survived because groups carried it together. The emotional atmosphere of winter may also have strengthened memory formation. Modern neuroscience shows that emotionally meaningful experiences are remembered more strongly than neutral information. A story told during a harsh winter night beside fading embers likely carried emotional weight simply because the environment itself felt intense and memorable. Cold, darkness, hunger, fear, and relief all sharpen human attention. Information shared during these moments may have become deeply fixed in memory because survival gave it importance. Early humans probably remembered lessons connected to winter especially well because mistakes during cold seasons carried serious consequences. Oral tradition may therefore owe part of its durability to the emotional pressure of prehistoric winter life. Repetition across many winters also created continuity between generations. A child listening to a story beside the fire might later repeat the same story decades afterward to younger members of the group. In this way, memory stretched across time through spoken language long before written history began. Winter nights slowed external life enough for these transmissions to occur repeatedly and carefully. The season forced humans to spend time together in ways warmer months often did not. Darkness reduced travel and movement, but it increased opportunities for listening. Some anthropologists suggest that long seasonal gatherings may have played a major role in the development of complex language itself. Human speech becomes richer when groups spend extended time communicating socially, rather than only exchanging immediate survival instructions. Winter may therefore have shaped not only what humans remembered, but how humans learned to speak about memory, emotion, and imagination in increasingly sophisticated ways. The long night encouraged detailed storytelling because there was finally enough uninterrupted time to sustain it. Hours of darkness created space where narratives could expand beyond short, practical warnings into larger, shared worlds of meaning. Yet, memory during winter nights was not always centered on survival knowledge alone. Humans also preserved emotional memory, who had died, who had survived difficult seasons, who had traveled far, who had returned. The night allowed grief and remembrance to exist collectively, instead of privately. Around the fire, stories about absent people could continue living through speech even after individuals themselves were gone. In this sense, winter storytelling may have helped humans develop a deeper awareness of continuity across generations. The group existed not only in the present moment, but inside remembered time, carried through voices. This may be one reason winter nights felt both heavy and meaningful. Darkness isolated people from the outside world, yet it also connected them more strongly to one another and to the memory of those who came before. While cold and silence stretched the feeling of endless time, stories gave humans a way to move through that time together. Each repeated narrative became proof that other winters had passed before this one, and that knowledge itself could survive longer than any single night. Perhaps this quiet preservation of memory beside ancient fires was one of the most important things early humans carried with them through the endless darkness of winter. Although modern humans live with electric light, heated buildings, and controlled schedules, the human body still carries biological systems shaped long before any of those things existed. Deep inside the brain, tiny structures continue measuring light and darkness, much as they did for early humans thousands of years ago. Winter still changes the chemistry of the body, even when modern life attempts to ignore the season completely. This may be one reason long winter nights continue to affect human mood, energy, and sleep today. The body remembers ancient patterns because evolution moves slowly, while technology changes very quickly. At the center of this system is the circadian rhythm, the internal cycle that helps regulate sleep, alertness, hormone release, body temperature, and many other processes. The circadian system depends heavily on light. When sunlight enters the eyes, signals travel to regions of the brain that help organize waking activity. As darkness increases, the body begins producing more melatonin, a hormone associated with sleepiness and nighttime physiology. Early humans lived almost entirely inside these natural cycles because artificial light after sunset remained extremely limited. Winter, therefore, changed the body profoundly. Shorter days and longer nights altered hormone patterns for months at a time. Modern humans still experience these biological shifts, even though electric lighting partially masks them. Scientists studying seasonal biology have found that many people sleep slightly longer during winter months, feel less energetic, or experience changes in mood when daylight decreases. Some individuals develop seasonal affective disorder, a form of depression associated with reduced sunlight exposure. These reactions are not modern inventions. They likely reflect ancient systems that evolved under conditions where winter darkness shaped survival directly. Early humans may have experienced stronger versions of the same biological slowing because their exposure to natural seasonal light was far more complete than ours. Winter nights were not only psychologically longer, the body itself entered a different seasonal rhythm. The modern world often treats human schedules as fixed and independent from nature. Work, school, and artificial lighting encourage similar routines throughout the year. Yet the body does not fully obey these social systems. Even now, many people feel naturally sleepier during dark winter evenings and more alert during long summer days. This pattern suggests that ancient adaptations remain active beneath modern habits. For early humans, these seasonal shifts would have been impossible to ignore. Darkness arrived earlier, temperatures dropped, and activity patterns slowed together. The entire human organism adjusted to winter conditions. Light exposure also influences serotonin, a neurotransmitter connected to mood and emotional stability. Reduced daylight can lower serotonin activity in some individuals, contributing to feelings of heaviness, fatigue, or emotional withdrawal during winter months. Anthropologists and evolutionary psychologists sometimes suggest that reduced winter activity may once have been adaptive. Conserving energy during colder seasons could improve survival, when food became less predictable and travel more dangerous. In this view, the slowing of mood and behavior during winter may not originally have been a malfunction, but part of an ancient survival rhythm. Early humans likely experienced winter not as a separate inconvenience added to life, but as a full-body environmental state affecting thought, movement, sleep, and emotion together. Modern technology has weakened some of these effects, but not erased them completely. Bright screens extend waking hours. Indoor heating reduces exposure to cold. Artificial light allows activity long after sunset. Yet many people still notice subtle emotional differences during winter. Dark mornings feel heavier. Evenings seem longer. Motivation changes. The body continues responding to seasonal light because it evolved for hundreds of thousands of years under natural conditions that no longer dominate modern life in the same way. Researchers studying isolated populations without electric lighting often observe sleep patterns much closer to natural seasonal cycles. These findings suggest that the modern human body still contains ancient timing systems beneath contemporary habits. Winter continues speaking to biology, even when culture attempts to silence it. This connection to the past may help explain why winter nights still feel emotionally different today. A modern person sitting awake during a dark winter evening may experience sensations that once shaped prehistoric survival: slower thought, increased reflection, heaviness in the body, altered sleep, and awareness of extended darkness beyond the window. The environment has changed dramatically since the time of early humans, but the nervous system remains partly built for that older world. Perhaps the endless feeling of winter nights never disappeared entirely because human biology still recognizes darkness the way it did long ago. Somewhere beneath electric light and modern schedules, the body continues quietly responding to ancient seasonal rhythms carried forward from countless winters, survived before recorded history began. Winter does not affect every human mind in the same way, yet across many cultures and climates, people have repeatedly described similar feelings during the darkest months of the year. Energy slows. Motivation changes. Thought becomes quieter and more inward. Even in modern cities filled with artificial light, many individuals still feel emotionally different during long winter nights. Scientists now understand that these experiences are connected partly to biology, but they may also reflect something older, carried through human evolution. Early humans lived through countless winters where darkness shaped survival directly, and traces of those ancient seasonal pressures may still remain inside modern emotional life. One of the clearest modern examples is seasonal affective disorder, often called SAD. This condition involves recurring depression-like symptoms linked to reduced daylight exposure during certain times of the year, particularly winter. Symptoms can include fatigue, increased sleepiness, low mood, difficulty concentrating, and withdrawal from social activity. Researchers believe light plays a major role because sunlight helps regulate serotonin, melatonin, and circadian rhythms within the brain. When daylight decreases, these systems can shift in ways that affect emotional stability. While severe seasonal depression does not affect everyone, milder forms of winter slowing are extremely common. Many people report feeling less energetic and more reflective during darker months. From an evolutionary perspective, some scientists suggest that these winter changes may once have served practical purposes. In prehistoric environments, conserving energy during harsh seasons could improve survival. Food was often harder to obtain. Travel became more dangerous. Cold increased physical stress on the body. Under such conditions, reduced activity and greater caution may have been adaptive rather than harmful. Early humans, who slowed down during winter, may have avoided unnecessary risks and preserved valuable energy. The modern world often interprets reduced productivity negatively because contemporary society expects consistent performance across all seasons. Yet human biology may still carry rhythms shaped by a very different environmental reality. Darkness itself changes cognition in subtle ways. Studies show that reduced light exposure can increase inward attention and alter emotional processing. People often spend more time reflecting during winter, especially during long evenings with limited outdoor activity. Early humans likely experienced this inward turn intensely because winter removed many external distractions. Darkness limited movement, silence reduced stimulation, and long nights created extended periods where thought could drift slowly through memory and emotion. Winter may therefore have influenced not only physical survival, but also the development of introspection in human consciousness. Anthropologists frequently note that seasonal cycles shape emotional life across traditional societies. Winter festivals, rituals, gatherings, and storytelling traditions appear in many cultures because humans repeatedly sought ways to emotionally organize long periods of darkness. These traditions likely emerged partly as responses to the psychological effects of winter itself. Early humans probably understood instinctively that connection mattered more during dark seasons. Shared fires, conversation, songs, and stories reduced emotional isolation while the environment outside became colder and less hospitable. Modern humans continue similar behaviors today without always recognizing how ancient their roots may be. During winter, people still gather indoors more often, seek warmth and closeness, and turn toward reflection, memory, and ritual. The nervous system may still be responding to patterns established deep in human history. Winter also changes how time feels emotionally. Many people describe dark evenings as slower or heavier compared to bright summer days. Psychologists suggest that lower stimulation environments naturally stretch subjective time perception because fewer events divide attention into smaller units. Early humans living through long winter nights likely experienced this effect continuously. The season created extended periods where awareness lingered on silence, darkness, and internal thought. Modern humans occasionally encounter echoes of this ancient rhythm during quiet winter evenings, when the world outside grows still and time seems to move differently from ordinary daytime life. Yet it is important not to romanticize prehistoric winter entirely. Cold seasons could bring hunger, illness, and death. The emotional heaviness associated with winter likely emerged partly because the season carried real danger. Human beings evolved to respond seriously to environmental stress, and winter often represented uncertainty about survival itself. The psychological effects of darkness, therefore, contain both biological adaptation and emotional memory, shaped across generations of human experience. Perhaps this is why winter nights continue affecting people even now. Modern technology protects humans from many physical dangers of the season, but it cannot completely erase the ancient relationship between darkness and the human mind. Somewhere beneath electric light and heated rooms, the nervous system still reacts to long nights with caution, introspection, slowing, and emotional sensitivity. The body remembers winter not only as weather, but as a condition that once shaped whether humans survived until spring returned again. Even after sunrise returned, winter often remained inside the human body and mind. Early humans did not experience morning as an instant release from darkness the way modern artificial lighting can create today. Winter dawn arrived slowly. The sky brightened in stages while cold air still covered the landscape. Fires needed rebuilding. Frozen ground remained difficult to cross. The emotional heaviness of the long night sometimes lingered into the day itself. This gradual transition between darkness and daylight may have shaped how humans emotionally understood winter as an entire season rather than simply a collection of cold nights. Modern people often separate day from night very sharply, because electric lighting creates clear boundaries between activity and rest. Early humans lived inside softer transitions. Dawn and dusk lasted longer psychologically because the environment changed gradually. During winter, these transitions became especially important. A person waking before sunrise might remain surrounded by dim blue-gray light for long periods before full daylight finally appeared. Researchers studying circadian rhythms note that human alertness rises slowly in natural light conditions compared to artificially lit environments. Early humans therefore likely carried traces of nighttime physiology well into the morning during winter months. The body did not switch instantly from night mode into full daytime energy. This slower awakening may help explain why winter often feels emotionally heavy even now. Light exposure strongly affects hormone regulation, but those biological systems respond gradually rather than immediately. Melatonin levels decrease over time after sunrise, while alertness-related processes increase more slowly in low winter light. Early humans living under natural seasonal conditions probably experienced these gradual shifts deeply because there was little artificial stimulation overriding them. Winter mornings remained quiet, cold, and physically demanding. The nervous system stayed partially slowed even after darkness ended. Anthropologists studying traditional societies often observe that activity patterns during cold seasons differ substantially from warmer periods. People rise later when possible, move more carefully, and conserve energy. Early humans likely adapted behavior to winter rather than resisting it completely. In this sense, the endless feeling of winter nights may not have stopped at dawn. The season stretched its influence across entire days through reduced light, slower movement, and continued awareness of environmental hardship. Modern humans still experience echoes of this pattern. Many people notice that winter mornings feel unusually difficult despite adequate sleep. Getting out of bed becomes harder. Motivation arrives more slowly. The world outside appears quieter and less inviting than during brighter seasons. These reactions are often treated as inconveniences of modern life, but they may reflect ancient biological responses shaped when winter conditions directly affected survival. The human body evolved in environments where conserving energy during dark seasons could be beneficial. Morning lethargy may partly reflect those older adaptations still operating beneath modern schedules. Winter also changes emotional perception of space and time during daylight itself. Short days compress the visible world. The sun remains low in the sky. Shadows lengthen earlier. Even afternoon can begin feeling like evening. Early humans likely noticed this intensely because daylight hours determined when travel, gathering, hunting, and social movement could safely occur. The shrinking window of usable daylight may have created constant awareness that darkness would soon return again. Winter, therefore, became cyclical psychologically. The night never felt fully finished because another long night was already approaching by late afternoon. This repeating rhythm may have deepened the sensation that winter itself was endless. The body and mind rarely escape the season completely, even during daytime, yet humans also adapted emotionally to this rhythm over thousands of years. Winter encouraged different forms of attention. Slower mornings created opportunities for observation rather than constant movement. Fire building, tool repair, food preparation, and quiet conversation became central parts of daily survival. The season shifted human life inward physically and mentally. Modern society often values speed, brightness, and uninterrupted productivity, making winter feel frustrating or unnatural. Early humans may have understood winter differently. The season demanded patience because resisting its rhythms completely was impossible. Dawn arrived slowly. Warmth returned gradually. Energy moved carefully through the body instead of rushing forward. In this way, winter shaped not only nights, but entire patterns of human awareness. Even now, beneath modern technology and artificial schedules, traces of those ancient rhythms remain. Many people still feel quieter during winter mornings, more reflective during dark evenings, and more emotionally aware of passing time when daylight grows short. The endless feeling of winter nights may therefore survive not because humans fear darkness the way early ancestors once did, but because the body continues responding to seasonal change with ancient biological memories that modern life has never fully erased. For early humans, winter was not experienced only through cold and darkness. It was also experienced through hunger and uncertainty about food. During warmer seasons, many environments offered more predictable access to plants, animals, eggs, fish, or migrating herds. Winter disrupted these patterns. Vegetation disappeared beneath frost or snow. Animal behavior changed. Rivers froze. Storms made movement more dangerous. The long winter night, therefore, carried an additional emotional weight, because humans often entered darkness already aware that survival resources were becoming harder to secure. This constant background uncertainty may have made winter nights feel even longer and heavier than darkness alone could explain. Archaeological evidence suggests that prehistoric groups adapted to winter in many different ways depending on climate and geography. Some relied heavily on stored food when possible. Others followed migrating animals or shifted seasonal campsites, yet no strategy completely removed risk. Food preservation before agriculture and modern storage technologies remained difficult and unreliable in many environments. A successful hunt might provide temporary abundance, but harsh weather or changing animal movements could quickly create scarcity again. Winter forced humans to think ahead, because mistakes became harder to recover from once cold intensified and daylight shortened. This pressure likely affected the emotional atmosphere of nighttime itself. A person sitting beside a fire during winter may not only have felt darkness and silence, but also uncertainty about the coming days. Human psychology responds strongly to unpredictability around food, because survival depends on stable energy intake. Modern research shows that food insecurity increases stress, vigilance, and mental preoccupation even in relatively safe environments. Early humans faced these conditions far more directly. Hunger was not abstract. The body felt it physically. Children felt it. Entire groups depended on collective success to survive difficult seasons. Winter nights may therefore have contained long periods where people thought quietly about resources, weather, hunting conditions, or how long stored food might last. Darkness slowed physical activity, but it did not quiet concern about survival. Cold itself also increases the body's energy needs. Maintaining warmth requires calories, especially in harsh climates. This created a difficult paradox for early humans during winter. At the exact time food often became less reliable, the body sometimes required more energy simply to remain warm enough. Fire helped reduce this burden, but fuel and food were both limited resources demanding constant effort. Researchers studying traditional cold environment populations note how deeply winter shapes patterns of labor, planning, and energy conservation. Early humans likely organized much of winter life around minimizing unnecessary energy loss. Movement became more careful, risk-taking decreased. Rest gained importance because exhaustion carried greater danger in cold conditions. This slower rhythm may have contributed further to the feeling that winter nights stretched endlessly. There were fewer distractions from awareness of physical need. Darkness intensified these concerns because nighttime reduced opportunities to solve problems immediately. During daylight, people could travel, hunt, gather wood, or search for resources. At night, especially during severe winter weather, action became limited. Humans were left mainly with waiting. The fire could be maintained. Shelter could be reinforced. But many uncertainties could not be resolved until morning. This inability to act may have made nighttime worry feel especially heavy. Modern psychology often observes that anxiety intensifies during periods where action is impossible and uncertainty remains unresolved. Early humans likely experienced similar patterns during winter darkness. The night became emotionally longer because people waited inside it while survival questions remained unanswered until dawn. Yet hunger and scarcity may also have strengthened cooperation. Anthropologists studying hunter-gatherer societies frequently emphasize the importance of food sharing in human evolution. During difficult seasons, survival often depended less on individual success than on group resilience. Winter nights gathered people together physically around limited warmth and limited resources. Sharing food near the fire reinforced social bonds because every meal carried visible importance. Eating during winter darkness was not casual consumption. It was reassurance that survival had continued for another day. The emotional meaning of food likely deepened during long winters because each successful meal stood against surrounding uncertainty. Children sleeping beside full stomachs after difficult weather may have represented temporary relief felt by the entire group. In this way, winter nights were shaped not only by the absence of light, but by awareness of fragile survival itself. Darkness, cold, hunger, and waiting combined into one continuous experience stretching across the season. The fire offered warmth, stories offered meaning, shared food offered hope. Yet beyond the shelter remained the silent winter landscape, where tomorrow's survival still depended on forces humans could never fully control. Perhaps this uncertainty made winter nights feel endless more than anything else. Time moves slowly when the future itself feels fragile, and dawn cannot immediately solve the problems waiting beyond the darkness. Winter forced early humans to become patient observers of small changes. In warmer seasons, movement and activity often filled the day so completely that time passed through constant action. Winter reduced that rhythm. Snow, cold, and shortened daylight slowed travel and limited opportunities to gather resources safely. As a result, survival sometimes depended not on speed, but on careful attention to subtle signs in the environment. And future nights people may have spent hours thinking about weather, animal movement, firewood supplies, or the condition of the landscape beyond the shelter. The season trained humans to watch slowly because even small changes could determine survival. This way of living altered the experience of time itself. Modern life encourages quick reaction and constant stimulation. Early humans during winter often faced the opposite condition. Much of survival depended on waiting correctly. A hunting group might need to conserve energy until weather improved. Families may have remained sheltered during storms rather than risking unnecessary travel. Food stores had to be managed carefully because the season could last longer than expected. In such environments, patience became a practical skill rather than a personal virtue. Winter rewarded those who understood how to endure long periods without immediate resolution. Nights stretched across hours where little visibly changed, yet people still remained alert to small details that mattered deeply. Snow itself likely sharpened this attention. Tracks left in snow preserve information clearly for short periods before wind or new snowfall erases them. Early humans living in cold regions probably became highly skilled at reading these temporary signs. A set of footprints might reveal whether animals had passed nearby recently, whether predators were approaching, or whether another group had moved through the area. Winter landscapes, therefore, demanded close observation. The environment looked still, but it contained traces of movement hidden inside subtle details. Anthropologists, studying traditional tracking cultures, often note how carefully humans learn to interpret marks, sounds, and environmental changes when survival depends on them. Winter may have intensified this observational mindset because resources became harder to replace once lost. Long nights likely reinforced this slower awareness. During darkness, immediate action was often impossible. People sitting near the fire had time to think carefully about conditions outside. Wind direction, temperature changes, snow accumulation, and animal behavior all mattered. A storm beginning during the night could affect the next day's movement or hunting possibilities. Someone listening quietly might notice changes in wind against the shelter or hear branches shifting under heavy snow. In winter, survival sometimes depended on noticing gradual environmental changes before they became dangerous. The human brain adapts strongly to environments where small signals carry important meaning. Researchers studying attention note that low stimulation settings often increase sensitivity to subtle details because the mind is not overwhelmed by constant information. Early humans likely experienced this during winter nights repeatedly. Silence allowed faint sounds to become important. Darkness made firelight movement noticeable. Long waiting sharpened awareness because there were fewer distractions competing for attention. This may be one reason winter nights felt psychologically large. The mind stretched itself across small changes occurring slowly through time instead of jumping rapidly between many different tasks. Patience also became emotional endurance. Winter often offered no quick solutions. Hunger could not always be fixed immediately. Weather could not be controlled. Daylight returned gradually rather than suddenly. Humans had to tolerate uncertainty across long periods while continuing basic survival tasks carefully and consistently. Modern psychology recognizes that uncertainty becomes easier to endure when people can observe predictable patterns within difficult conditions. Early humans likely relied heavily on seasonal patterns for this reason. The lengthening of daylight after midwinter, the return of certain animals, the melting of ice, or changes in weather all signaled that the harshest conditions would eventually pass. Yet these changes occurred slowly enough that humans needed patience simply to notice them. Winter, therefore, shaped a different relationship with time. Instead of expecting rapid change, people learned to survive through gradual progression, almost invisible from one day to the next. Around the fire at night, this awareness may have deepened further. Someone staring into embers after a difficult winter day might think not in terms of hours but in terms of seasons. Survival depended on enduring slowly rather than escaping quickly. The night outside remained dark and cold, yet humans continued watching, waiting, and adjusting carefully to the environment around them. Perhaps this patient attention became one of the most important human adaptations of all. Winter taught early humans that life often moves through nearly invisible changes, long before those changes become visible in the world. And in the endless darkness of winter nights, people may have learned to measure time not by speed, but by endurance. For early humans, winter may have been the season that most clearly revealed how little control people truly had over the world around them. During warmer months, movement and activity could create the feeling that humans shaped their environment directly. People hunted, traveled, gathered food, built shelters, and followed changing landscapes across large distances. Winter reduced many of those possibilities. Darkness lengthened. Storms blocked movement. Cold punished mistakes quickly. Entire groups sometimes became dependent on whether weather changed, animals returned, or stored resources lasted long enough. In this sense, winter nights were not only physically long, they constantly reminded humans that survival depended on forces much larger than individual effort. Modern society often assumes that problems can be solved quickly through action. If a room becomes cold, heat can be turned on instantly. If darkness arrives, electric light removes it. If food runs low, stores remain open regardless of season. Early humans lived without these layers of protection. Winter exposed the limits of human power directly. Fire could warm only small spaces. Food supplies could disappear. Storms could trap people inside shelters for long periods. Dawn itself arrived slowly, no matter how urgently humans wished for light. This helplessness may have shaped the emotional atmosphere of winter nights more deeply than modern people usually imagine. Human psychology struggles with uncertainty, partly because the brain prefers environments where actions produce predictable outcomes. Winter often interrupted that expectation. A hunting group could prepare carefully and still fail because weather changed suddenly or animals moved elsewhere. A fire could weaken despite effort. Illness could spread during cold months when bodies were already under stress. During long nights, people may have lain awake aware that some problems could not be solved immediately through effort alone. The darkness became a period of waiting for conditions beyond human control to change. Anthropologists studying traditional societies frequently observe how environmental uncertainty shapes belief systems, rituals, and social behavior. Humans naturally search for stability when facing forces they cannot control directly. Winter may therefore have strengthened emotional dependence on community, routine, and repeated seasonal knowledge. The group survived not by dominating winter completely, but by enduring it together carefully enough until conditions improved. Patience became survival. Fire maintenance, food sharing, shelter repair, and careful energy use all reflected this reality. Early humans may have understood instinctively that winter could not be conquered quickly. It had to be lived through gradually. Long winter nights likely intensified this awareness because darkness reduced the ability to act. During daylight, humans could still search, move, repair, and adapt physically to the environment. At night, many possibilities disappeared. People were left mainly with observation, reflection, and waiting. The fire glowed within a small shelter, while the larger world remained hidden outside. Storms continued whether humans wished them to stop or not. Temperatures continued falling. Snow accumulated slowly through the night without asking permission from anyone. This experience may have deepened a sense of humility toward nature itself. Winter repeatedly demonstrated that human life remained fragile despite intelligence, tools, and cooperation. Yet this awareness may also have strengthened emotional resilience. Modern psychology notes that humans often adapt better to hardship when they accept uncertainty rather than expecting constant control. Early humans likely developed this adaptation naturally because winter demanded it year after year. Not every question could be answered immediately. Not every danger could be removed. Sometimes survival meant conserving strength quietly while waiting for daylight, changing weather, or the eventual return of spring. This slower relationship with uncertainty may have shaped human consciousness profoundly over time. The endless feeling of winter nights may therefore have emerged partly from the recognition that some things cannot be rushed. Darkness ends only when the earth turns. Storms pass according to weather, not desire. Hunger fades only if food returns. Humans could prepare, cooperate, and endure, but they could not command winter to shorten itself. In this way, the season forced people into direct contact with the limits of human control. Perhaps this experience left traces still visible today. Even modern people often feel reflective during long winter evenings. The season encourages awareness of time, vulnerability, patience, and uncertainty in ways brighter months often do not. Beneath modern comfort, the human mind may still recognize something ancient in winter darkness, the understanding that life cannot always move at the speed we want. Some nights remain long no matter how urgently we wait for morning. And perhaps early humans, sitting quietly beside fading fires while snow continued falling unseen beyond the shelter, understood this truth more clearly than anyone who came after them. Winter may have changed not only how early humans survived, but also how they understood one another emotionally. Long nights gathered people together in confined spaces for extended periods, unlike most other seasons. During warmer months, individuals and small groups often spread outward through movement, hunting, gathering, and travel. Winter repeatedly pulled human life inward. Darkness arrived early. Cold discouraged unnecessary movement. Fires became central gathering points where people spent many hours close enough to hear one another breathe, shift during sleep, or speak softly across the night. This constant proximity may have strengthened forms of emotional awareness that became deeply important in human social evolution. Human beings are unusually social compared to many other species. Survival depends heavily on cooperation, communication, and emotional coordination within groups. Anthropologists frequently point out that humans evolved not only intelligence, but also strong sensitivity to facial expression, tone of voice, and social behavior. Winter may have intensified these traits because difficult seasons increased dependence on one another. During long nights, people could not easily escape conflict, loneliness, or emotional tension by simply moving away into open landscapes. The group remained together physically for survival. This created conditions where emotional awareness became necessary rather than optional. Firelight likely played a subtle role in this process. Unlike daylight, which spreads attention outward across wide environments, firelight concentrates focus on nearby faces and voices. People sitting around fires naturally watch one another more closely because the illuminated space remains small. Facial expressions become highly visible while the outside world disappears into darkness. Researchers studying social behavior note that eye contact, synchronized conversation, and shared attention strengthen emotional bonding within groups. Early humans may have experienced these effects repeatedly during winter nights as firelight narrowed awareness toward the people closest to them. Long evenings together also increased opportunities for observing emotional states over time. Someone exhausted, frightened, grieving, or withdrawn could not easily hide these feelings across endless hours of shared shelter. The group witnessed one another continuously through waking, resting, storytelling, eating, and waiting. This may have strengthened human empathy gradually because survival depended partly on recognizing the needs and conditions of others nearby. A child becoming weak from hunger, an elder struggling with cold, or a hunter returning injured all carried visible consequences for the entire group. Winter exposed vulnerability more clearly because resources were limited and environmental stress remained constant. Modern neuroscience suggests that humans possess specialized systems for emotional mirroring and social sensitivity. People unconsciously respond to the moods and expressions of others around them. Early humans living through winter together likely depended on these systems deeply. Shared fear could spread quickly, but so could reassurance. Calm voices around the fire may have reduced tension. Familiar routines may have stabilized emotions during storms or difficult conditions. The emotional atmosphere of the group itself became part of survival. Winter nights, therefore, may have shaped not only practical cooperation, but the development of emotional intelligence within human communities. Storytelling likely reinforced this process further. Listening to stories requires attention toward the experiences and feelings of others. Human narratives often center around danger, loss, courage, memory, and survival. Around winter fires, people may have repeatedly practiced imagining situations from perspectives beyond their own immediate experience. Some psychologists argue that storytelling strengthens empathy partly because listeners mentally simulate emotional experiences through narrative. If so, long prehistoric winters may have provided ideal conditions for deepening these abilities across generations. Yet, winter closeness also carried difficulty. Human groups living in confined spaces for long periods inevitably face tension, exhaustion, and conflict. Limited food, interrupted sleep, and environmental stress can increase irritability even in modern conditions. Early humans likely experienced these pressures strongly during harsh winters. The remarkable fact is not that conflict existed, but that cooperation survived despite it. Human beings learned to continue living together through long nights because separation often meant greater danger than compromise. Winter, therefore, may have taught emotional endurance alongside emotional closeness. People endured one another because survival required it. Over thousands of years, this repeated experience may have strengthened the human capacity for patience, reconciliation, and group cohesion under stress. Perhaps this is one reason winter nights felt so emotionally powerful to early humans. Darkness removed many distractions that normally separated people during daytime life. Around the fire, individuals encountered one another directly for hours at a time while the larger world disappeared beyond the shelter walls. The season revealed not only the harshness of nature, but also how deeply human survival depended on remaining emotionally connected through fear, exhaustion, silence, and waiting together until morning finally returned again. Winter nights may also have changed how early humans understood loneliness. In modern life, people can experience isolation even while surrounded by cities, technology, and constant communication. Early humans faced a different emotional reality. Survival often depended so completely on the group that separation carried immediate physical danger. During harsh winters, being alone at night in cold environments could quickly become life-threatening. Fire required maintenance. Predators still moved through darkness. Illness or injury became harder to survive without help nearby. As a result, human closeness during winter was not only emotional comfort, it was protection against the environment itself. This may have shaped the deep human fear of isolation that still exists today. Anthropologists studying hunter-gatherer societies frequently note that humans evolved as intensely cooperative beings. Food sharing, childcare, defense, and knowledge transmission all depended on social connection. Winter amplified these dependencies because difficult conditions increased the cost of separation. A single individual alone in freezing darkness faced far greater risk than a connected group, sharing warmth and resources together. Early humans likely understood this reality emotionally as well as practically. The sound of nearby breathing during a winter night may have provided reassurance because it signaled that one was still part of a protective human circle against the surrounding cold and uncertainty. Darkness strengthened this feeling because night removes visual awareness of the larger world. Firelight illuminates only a small area, while everything beyond it disappears into shadow. In such conditions, nearby human presence becomes psychologically powerful. A voice, movement, or familiar sleeping figure confirms that others remain close, even when the outside environment cannot be clearly seen. Neuroscientists studying attachment and social bonding have found that human beings regulate stress partly through physical and emotional proximity to trusted others. Heart rate, fear responses, and emotional stability all change depending on whether people feel socially connected or isolated. Early humans living through long winters likely depended on these biological systems constantly. The group calmed the nervous system because togetherness increased chances of survival. Winter shelters probably created some of the strongest experiences of collective human presence in prehistoric life. Multiple people slept, woke, ate, and waited together inside confined spaces for long periods. This closeness may have strengthened emotional attachment within families and groups because repeated shared experiences deepen social bonds over time. Modern psychology shows that emotional closeness often develops through enduring difficulty together rather than through comfort alone. Early humans survived cold, hunger, storms, interrupted sleep, and uncertainty side by side during winter. These shared hardships may have created powerful forms of trust and emotional dependence, yet winter also revealed how painful human absence could feel. Illness, injury, or death during cold seasons may have carried especially heavy emotional weight because every person contributed to group survival. Losing someone during winter meant more than emotional grief alone. It changed the group's practical stability, labor capacity, and shared sense of safety. Around the fire at night, the absence of a familiar voice or sleeping place would have been deeply noticeable. Silence itself may have felt different after loss because winter shelters concentrated human presence so intensely. Anthropologists often observe that communal living strengthens awareness of absence because individuals become woven into daily rhythms of sound, movement, and routine. Early humans likely experienced this strongly during long winter nights where every person formed part of the shelter's emotional atmosphere. The fear of abandonment may also trace partly back to these ancient conditions. In modern society, being alone rarely carries the same immediate environmental danger that it once did, yet humans still experience social rejection or isolation as emotionally painful. Some neuroscientists note that social pain activates many of the same brain systems involved in physical pain. From an evolutionary perspective, this makes sense. For early humans, losing connection to the group could threaten survival directly, especially during winter. Emotional distress around loneliness may therefore reflect ancient adaptive systems designed to keep humans socially bonded in dangerous environments. Winter nights repeatedly reinforced the importance of belonging because darkness and cold made human closeness visibly necessary. Around the fire, the difference between isolation and connection became unmistakably real. Perhaps this is why winter still carries emotional associations with togetherness in many cultures today. Even now, people often seek family, conversation, warmth, and companionship during dark seasons. The modern world provides physical safety in ways early humans never possessed, yet the emotional patterns remain surprisingly familiar. Long winter nights continue reminding humans that isolation feels heavier in darkness, while shared presence makes uncertainty easier to endure. Somewhere deep within the nervous system, the ancient memory may still remain. Survival once depended on hearing other human beings nearby, while the cold night stretched endlessly beyond the firelight. Over thousands of winters, early humans may have slowly learned that survival depended not only on strength or intelligence, but on the ability to remain emotionally steady through long periods of uncertainty. Winter nights repeatedly confronted people with conditions they could not immediately change. Darkness lasted for many hours. Storms continued beyond human control. Hunger sometimes persisted despite effort. The body became tired while dawn still felt far away. Under these conditions, emotional stability itself may have become an important survival skill. A group overwhelmed by panic, conflict, or despair would struggle to cooperate effectively through difficult seasons. Winter therefore may have shaped the human capacity for endurance in ways deeper than physical adaptation alone. Modern psychology often distinguishes between short bursts of stress and long-term resilience. Sudden danger activates immediate survival responses, but enduring hardship over extended periods requires different emotional systems. Early humans likely experienced both during winter. A predator encounter demanded rapid reaction, but most winter suffering unfolded slowly. Cold nights, uncertain food, interrupted sleep, illness, waiting for weather to improve. These conditions required patience more than speed. The human nervous system had to learn how to continue functioning even when relief was not immediate. Winter may therefore have strengthened psychological endurance through repeated exposure to prolonged uncertainty. Long nights played a central role in this process. because darkness stretched awareness across time. During daylight, movement and practical tasks provided direction. At night, humans often faced stillness instead. The fire burned slowly. The shelter remained quiet. Outside conditions could not easily be changed until morning. In this environment, emotional states became highly noticeable. Fear, frustration, grief, hope, exhaustion, and calm all existed together inside the same confined space. Anthropologists, studying communal living environments, often observe that emotional regulation becomes especially important when people remain close together under stress for long periods. Early humans likely learned, consciously or unconsciously, that emotional steadiness helped preserve group stability during difficult winters. Firelight may have contributed subtly to this emotional regulation. Researchers studying natural flame exposure suggest that watching fire can reduce stress and encourage calmer attention states. The rhythmic movement of flames, combined with warmth and predictable sound, may help quiet the nervous system. Early humans spent countless winter hours near fires, often during moments when little else could be controlled. The fire became one of the few stable elements within uncertain surroundings. It provided warmth, light, protection, and perhaps psychological reassurance as well. Sitting quietly beside flames during endless winter nights may have taught humans how to remain emotionally present even while uncertainty continued beyond the shelter walls. Social connections strengthened this endurance further. People rarely faced winter alone. Shared routines helped organize emotional life when external conditions became overwhelming. Maintaining the fire, preparing food, repairing tools, telling stories, and resting together created structure inside long nights where time otherwise felt shapeless. Modern psychology shows that routines reduce anxiety because predictable actions provide a sense of continuity during uncertain situations. Early humans likely depended heavily on repeated communal behaviors for this reason. Winter nights may have felt endless, but shared patterns gave humans ways to move through them gradually without losing emotional balance completely. Children growing up in these environments probably learned resilience by observing adults endure winter calmly. Emotional behavior spreads socially. A composed voice, familiar routine, or steady response to difficulty can reduce fear throughout a group. Over generations, humans may have developed cultural habits specifically designed to preserve emotional stability during harsh seasons. Songs, stories, rituals, and shared evening practices all helped transform frightening uncertainty into something more manageable and familiar. Winter remained difficult, but humans learned how to carry one another psychologically through it. Yet resilience did not mean the absence of fear or sadness. Early humans almost certainly experienced grief, anxiety, exhaustion, and despair during severe winters. Emotional endurance means continuing despite these feelings, rather than eliminating them entirely. Perhaps this distinction became one of the deepest lessons winter taught. The season revealed that humans could survive long periods of uncertainty, not because darkness stopped hurting, but because people learned how to remain connected and emotionally functional while moving slowly through it together. Even now, traces of this ancient endurance remain visible. During difficult periods, modern humans still seek routines, warmth, stories, familiar voices, and shared spaces. People continue searching for calm in environments of uncertainty, much as early humans once did beside winter fires. The endless feeling of winter nights may therefore have shaped more than prehistoric survival alone. It may have helped form the emotional resilience that still allows human beings to endure long periods of fear, waiting, and uncertainty, while continuing to hope quietly for morning. Modern humans rarely experience darkness the way early humans once did. Electric light now pushes back the night almost instantly. Heated buildings separate people from freezing air, Digital clocks divide time into precise numbers, making every hour measurable and controlled. Yet despite all these changes, winter nights still affect human emotion in ways that feel strangely ancient. Many people continue to describe dark evenings as reflective, heavy, calming, lonely, or emotionally deep. The modern world has transformed human environments rapidly, but the human nervous system still carries traces of the older world where winter shaped survival directly. This lingering connection may explain why long winter nights continue holding unusual psychological power even now. Researchers studying sleep and circadian biology often note that artificial lighting has dramatically changed human behavior within only a tiny fraction of evolutionary history. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans lived according to cycles of sunrise, sunset, firelight, and seasonal daylight variation. Electric illumination became widespread only recently compared to the vast timeline of human evolution. The brain systems regulating sleep, hormone production, alertness, and mood therefore developed under conditions far closer to prehistoric winter than to modern city life. Even today, exposure to darkness still influences melatonin, body temperature, emotional state, and sleep timing despite constant technological intervention. Winter continues speaking to the body in biological language older than civilization itself. Modern urban environments often try to erase seasonal awareness entirely. Stores remain open at night regardless of weather. Screens glow continuously. Buildings maintain similar temperatures year-round. Yet many people still notice emotional shifts during winter that technology does not fully remove. Dark evenings encourage staying indoors. Quiet weather changes attention. Cold air slows movement. Reflection often deepens during long nights. These responses may seem personal or cultural, but they also reflect ancient adaptations shaped over thousands of generations. Human consciousness evolved in environments where winter required caution, patience, closeness, and endurance. The nervous system still recognizes some of those conditions automatically. Anthropologists sometimes describe modern humans as living with Stone Age biology inside technologically transformed environments. This does not mean early humans were primitive versions of modern people. Their lives were profoundly different in almost every practical way. Yet the basic structure of the human brain remains remarkably ancient. Fear systems, attachment responses, circadian rhythms, stress regulation, and emotional bonding all evolved long before agriculture, cities, or electricity existed. Winter nights once activated these systems constantly because darkness carried real environmental consequences. Today, the consequences are reduced, but the emotional patterns often remain. A person sitting awake during a quiet winter evening may still feel pulled toward memory, introspection, or emotional sensitivity without fully understanding why. Silence itself may connect modern humans to ancient experience more than expected. During rare moments when artificial noise fades, people often become unusually aware of thought, emotion, and passing time. Early humans lived with this kind of silence regularly during winter. Darkness reduced external stimulation so completely that awareness naturally turned inward. Modern life usually prevents such extended stillness, yet winter occasionally reintroduces fragments of it. Snowfall quiets cities, long nights reduce activity, storms isolate homes from ordinary movement. In these moments, some people experience the same altered relationship with time that early humans may once have known intimately. The night feels slower, larger, and emotionally heavier than daytime life. Yet the legacy of winter is not only biological or emotional, it is also cultural. Across many societies, winter remains associated with gathering, storytelling, memory, ritual, and reflection. Holidays often cluster around the darkest part of the year. Families gather indoors. Candles and fires remain emotionally symbolic despite modern lighting. Human beings still seek warmth, conversation, and closeness during long nights, much as early humans once gathered around ancient hearths. These behaviors are not accidental traditions separated from biology. They may reflect deep continuity between prehistoric survival patterns and modern emotional life. Perhaps this is why winter nights continue feeling different even after humanity transformed the physical world around itself. Somewhere beneath modern schedules and artificial brightness, the nervous system still remembers environments where darkness could not simply be turned off. The body remembers cold seasons that required patience. The mind remembers long nights where silence stretched across hours beside fading firelight. And although modern humans no longer live exactly as early humans did, traces of those ancient winters may still move quietly through contemporary life whenever the nights grow long again and darkness settles slowly over the world. Perhaps the most important thing winter taught early humans was not fear, but awareness of time itself. Long winter nights forced people to experience duration directly in ways modern life often avoids. There were no fast distractions capable of making hours disappear instantly. Darkness could not be skipped. Cold could not be ignored. Waiting remained unavoidable. Early humans lived through nights where the mind stayed conscious of passing time for long stretches, sometimes beside fading fires, sometimes listening to storms, sometimes simply lying awake while the world remained silent outside the shelter. In these moments, humans may have developed a deeper relationship with patience, memory, and the slow movement of life itself. Modern societies often measure time mechanically through clocks, schedules, deadlines, and constant activity. Time becomes fragmented into tasks and obligations. Early humans experienced time more physically and environmentally. Winter especially changed how duration felt because the seasons slowed nearly everything. Movement became harder, daylight shortened, the environment reduced stimulation across long periods. As a result, awareness stretched across fewer events and fewer distractions. Psychologists studying perception note that time feels slower when attention is focused continuously on the present moment without strong interruption. Early humans during winter nights likely existed inside this condition repeatedly. The darkness made each hour emotionally visible, yet this slower relationship with time may also have shaped human wisdom. When life moves too quickly, reflection often becomes difficult. Winter forced reflection because the season removed many forms of external action. Around the fire at night, humans had little choice except to sit with memory, thought, emotion, and one another. Stories emerged, observations deepened. Small changes in weather or behavior became meaningful because people paid attention carefully over long durations. Winter taught humans to notice gradual processes rather than expecting immediate transformation. Snow accumulated slowly, daylight returned slowly, children grew slowly, healing happened slowly. Survival itself depended on respecting rhythms that could not be rushed. Anthropologists frequently observe that traditional societies often maintain stronger awareness of seasonal cycles than modern industrial cultures. Early humans likely understood deeply that life moved in repeating patterns larger than individual control. Winter was temporary, yet while inside it, the season could feel endless. This contradiction may have shaped human consciousness profoundly. People learned that difficult periods eventually change, even when daily experience suggests otherwise. The return of spring became visible proof that endurance through long darkness was possible. Perhaps this seasonal experience influenced how humans emotionally understood suffering, hope, and patience far beyond winter alone. Modern psychology recognizes that tolerance for delayed outcomes is an important part of emotional resilience. Humans who can endure uncertainty without immediate resolution often cope better with hardship over time. Early humans likely strengthened this capacity through repeated winter experience. They survived not because problems disappeared quickly, but because they learned how to continue living while waiting for conditions to improve gradually. Long nights trained attention toward endurance instead of instant relief. Even today, winter still encourages this slower awareness in subtle ways. People often become more reflective during dark seasons. Memories surface more easily during quiet evenings. The passing of time feels more noticeable when daylight shortens and outdoor activity slows. Many individuals experience winter as emotionally deeper than other seasons, even if they cannot fully explain why. Perhaps the nervous system still recognizes ancient environmental conditions where darkness once demanded patience and inward attention. Winter remains one of the few parts of modern life that still occasionally interrupts the illusion of constant speed. Yet early humans may also have discovered something comforting within this slowness. Endless winter nights were difficult, but they also revealed continuity. Fires were rebuilt each evening. Stories returned across generations. Morning eventually followed darkness, no matter how long the night seemed. Human beings learned that survival often depends less on controlling time than on remaining present inside it. Around ancient fires, people may have slowly understood that life itself unfolds through countless quiet hours that seem endless while they are happening, yet later become memory. Perhaps this is why winter nights still affect human emotions so strongly. They remind the mind of something modern life often tries to escape, the experience of simply existing within time without being able to rush it forward. And somewhere deep in human memory, early humans may still remain awake beside fading embers, listening to the endless winter darkness, while waiting patiently for the first distant signs of morning to return once again. Perhaps early humans never fully defeated the winter night. They survived it, adapted to it, learned from it, and carried one another through it, but the darkness itself always remained larger than any individual person. Every winter returned with its own silence, its own cold, its own endless hours, waiting beside fading fires, while dawn still felt impossibly far away. Yet, over thousands of generations, humans continued enduring those nights together. And somewhere within that long endurance, the winter night may have quietly shaped what it meant to become human. It shaped sleep, storytelling, memory, emotional closeness, patience, fear, and resilience. It slowed the body, it deepened reflection. It reminded people repeatedly that survival depended not only on strength, but also on warmth, cooperation, and the ability to remain calm while uncertainty continued beyond the shelter walls. Modern humans often imagine progress as separation from nature, as if technology has finally lifted humanity beyond the conditions that shaped earlier lives. In many ways, modern life truly is safer and more comfortable than prehistoric winter existence. Yet the human nervous system still carries ancient rhythms that do not disappear simply because environments change quickly. Darkness still alters mood. Long nights still encourage introspection. Silence still stretches awareness of time. People still gather around light during winter and seek comfort in familiar voices when the world outside feels cold or uncertain. These reactions are not failures of modern adaptation. They may be reminders that the human mind was formed in relationship with seasons much older than civilization itself. Early humans probably did not think about winter philosophically in the way modern societies sometimes do. Most were focused on practical survival, yet practical survival repeatedly exposed them to profound emotional experiences, waiting through uncertainty, depending on one another, grieving losses, enduring fear, and continuing despite not knowing exactly when relief would come. Winter forced humans into close contact with the limits of control. The season revealed that some realities move according to rhythms larger than individual desire. Dawn arrives slowly. Storms end gradually. Seasons change in their own time. Human beings could prepare and endure, but they could not command the darkness to shorten itself. Perhaps this quiet confrontation with time shaped human consciousness more deeply than we realize. The endless feeling of winter nights may have taught early humans something that remains difficult for modern people to accept. Not every problem can be solved immediately. Not every discomfort disappears quickly. Some parts of life require waiting, adaptation, and trust that change will eventually arrive even when no immediate evidence appears visible. Winter became a recurring lesson in uncertainty and continuation. People learned to sleep lightly beside fading embers because morning would not come faster simply because they wished for it. They learned to protect one another because isolation made darkness heavier. They learned to tell stories because shared meaning helped carry the mind through long, silent hours. And generation after generation, humans survived another winter by moving slowly through time together. Even now, during quiet winter evenings, traces of that ancient experience may still remain. A person sitting awake beside a dim light, while cold air presses softly against the windows, may feel something difficult to explain completely. Time seems slower, thoughts become deeper and quieter, memories return more easily. The world outside grows distant while attention turns inward. Modern life usually moves too quickly to notice these shifts clearly, but winter still creates moments where the older rhythms briefly return. In those moments, the distance between prehistoric humans and modern humans becomes smaller than it first appears. The same nervous system that once listened carefully beside ancient fires still exists inside the modern body today. And perhaps that is why winter nights continue feeling endless in ways no clock fully measures. The feeling does not come only from darkness itself. It comes from the ancient human experience of waiting inside uncertainty while remaining awake enough to feel time passing slowly around us. Early humans endured this feeling countless times across thousands of winters. They survived, not because the nights became shorter, but because they learned how to live inside the long darkness together until morning returned again. And somewhere beyond memory, beyond recorded history, beyond the reach of modern light, the question still quietly remains in the silence of every winter night. When humans first sat awake beside fading firelight while darkness stretched endlessly around them, did they already understand that some parts of being human would always belong to the night?